Hello, everyone. It is good to be back. Today, I'm going to be delivering to you my thoughts on the upcoming Lost Caverns of Ixalan limited format, helping you get prepared for draft and pre-release. But that's not all. I'm here with a special guest, some fucking guy from my local game store. Patrick, introduce yourself.
Well, this was how I was supposed to introduce myself, as a random guy from the local LTS. Moved here a year ago.
Yeah, about.
Good friend of Fred's.
Yeah, and
losing to Fred all the time. At FM,
well,
but not at Store Championships.
There's my credential. Patrick, describe your credentials. Why do you get to?
Been playing Magic the Gathering since Urza's Destiny.
Okay, I haven't been alive that long.
But not have. I've been drafting since I was 16, so that's now around 18 years. Almost.
I've been drafting since I was 16, which is around 8 years. So let's get right into it. We're coming off of Wilds of Eldraine, a format that I would regard as pretty okay, and into one that definitely looks very interesting. There's a lot to chew on here, so I'm excited to get Patrick's thoughts. I'm excited to give you our thoughts, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts in the comments. Before we start, just remember, I really love engaging with the comments. Feel free to give it a like, give it a subscribe, whatever other stuff. And let's get in there. So we're going to start with new and returning mechanics, and then best commons and uncommons by color. So we'll talk about the uncommons and commons that we think you should be picking highly. We're going to go over the limited archetypes so that you have a frame of reference for like what kind of decks are going to happen. We're going to go over the best bombs in the set, or at least my opinion on the best bombs in the set at the outset, just having done, I've done maybe 20 to 30 practice drafts on Draft Sim so far. So based on that, what I think's going on. And then some tips and tricks, just some insights that we have. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and I've been going over the set for like 2 times now, so I'm less into it than you are at this moment, but that might,
Yeah, I trust Patrick's insight. I think, he's one of my favorite people after F&M to just talk theory with, and so I think he'll bring a unique perspective here. And if you want to see more Patrick, go ahead and let us know in the comments. I want to make more content on the channel. I'm thinking about maybe starting a podcast again or something, so go ahead and give us your feedback in the comments. But without further ado, let's jump into the new and returning mechanics. Do you want to just take turns explaining them? So I'll explain the first one, and then...
You can go ahead and explain them. I will give comments.
All right, cool. Okay, color commentary. So the first new mechanic is Descend/Descent, and this one's actually a little awkward because half the time it's a keyword that asks if you put a permanent card in your graveyard this turn, and half the time it's an ability word that cares about how many permanents are in your graveyard, a la Threshold or Undergrowth. On screen here, we've got 3 cards that exemplify those mechanics. Patrick, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not even... To just give a disclaimer to people further down the broadcast, it's not even the biggest mess in rules text thing this time around.
Yeah, there are other mechanics.
I feel like they should have named this just 2 different things, but that's...
I agree. We'll see if it ends up being that much of an issue. I tend to tune out ability words when I'm drafting, but... Yeah, so that's Descend. We've got a few cards on here that exemplify it. I think it'll be relatively easy to hit Descend 4. In draft, Descend 8 maybe a little harder. Comparing it to Undergrowth, though, like you could get to Undergrowth relatively easily in Guilds of Ravnica, and that was creatures specifically. It didn't count lands, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever. So, yeah, that's Descend and Descent.
This is a tip off the bat. I don't play the card on the right here. Song of Stupefaction.
Yeah, I'm never big on the -X/-O that they keep trying to make happen every few formats.
Nope.
It takes a lot for that card to be good. So we're going to talk about a returning mechanic next. I organized these based on how it made sense with the flow. Normally I do like the new mechanics and then the returning mechanics, but like one of the new mechanics has a returning mechanic in it. So anyway, Explore is essentially you reveal the top card of your library. You have to show it to everybody. If it's a land, you get to just draw it. Otherwise, you get to surveil and put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that's exploring. So that means you get to either keep it on top or put it in the graveyard. But either way, if it's a spell, your creature gets a counter. If not, you draw it. So we've got Seeker of Sunlight here, a Repeated Explorer, and then a couple creatures that explore when they enter the battlefield, which is most of the exploring you're going to see in the set. Patrick, your thoughts? This is our second time seeing Explore.
Yeah, it was very good the last time. All the creatures that are, and I think River Herald Scout is a good example of that. All the creatures that are efficiently casted, and especially when they get the +1/+1 counter, those will be high picks in the draft. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And I think even though it was pretty good in the last limited format, it does seem like they're really pushing the stats on the creatures that are entering the battlefield with Explorer in this set. Would you agree? They're almost square stats, which means that they'll be better than square stats if the Explorer is successful, and if not, you will have drawn a card. So
yeah, it's like evaluate the card. Would you play it if you just get to scry the top card of your deck and see the card basically? Would you do that on 2 mana, 1/2? That's probably fine.
Yeah, and then it gets a counter. Yeah. So that's Explore, and then we've got a mechanic that kind of contains with Explore within it. We've got a new type of artifact token called map tokens, and these are very simple. They can only be activated as a sorcery, so you got to remember that. They don't. All the other ones, clues, blood, food, you can activate an instant speed, but these are sorcery only. They're 1 tap and sacrifice this artifact. Target creature you control explores. Activate only as a sorcery. And a lot of these you see they're coming on creatures with square stats. They're a rider on a spell. We've got a 1-mana 1/1 flyer that makes a map token when it comes in. We've got a 3-mana 2/1 artifact creature. Like, this is kind of a bonus on these cards. And as we get into it later, we'll see these synergize with a mechanic that cares about having artifacts out. So there is more to these than just a delayed explore, but that is what's printed on the token, and then they have some synergies after the fact. Patrick, your thoughts on map tokens?
Yeah, I think the 1 mana activation cost is not an obstacle at all.
Yeah.
You're always looking for mana 6 down the line, and explore will be good at any time in the game. So if you're stuck on board versus your opponent, Explorer might actually help you get out, right? With the +1/+1 counters. Let's say you have 3 map tokens at that time, turn 5, 6 or whatever.
Right.
And that 1 mana will not be an issue.
Yeah. There are plenty of turns where you're staggered on mana. You're maybe playing one curve behind, and you love to have a map token in that case. That's one of the best. That's gonna be one of the best ways to feel like you're spending your mana correctly. And then we've got Craft. So Patrick alluded to earlier a mechanic with a ton of just gunky text all over it, right? This mechanic's really going for flavor. They're all double-faced cards, and basically the way they work is they have craft with and then a list of items. Sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's a specific thing, sometimes it's whatever, sometimes it's several specific things. But what you have to do to craft it is you have to pay the cost, you have to exile it, and you have to exile the listed ingredients, we'll call them, from your battlefield or your graveyard. So, for instance, if you have a card that says craft with 2 artifacts, you can craft with artifacts from your battlefield, you can craft with artifact cards from your graveyard, and then you get to essentially flip it and have it come back to the battlefield. This mechanic is clunky as hell. Patrick, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is definitely an arena mechanic. This will... At pre-release weekend for sure, and probably the first few weeks, people will misread their own cards on this, on what they have to craft with, and if they can actually craft it in a good way. Some cards.
Absolutely. I initially thought all the commons and uncommons were craft with artifacts, so I was misreading a card and didn't think it was good as it was because it said craft with creature. Yeah. So these are cards you're gonna have to be reading 3 or 4 times. In terms of mechanics that slow down the gameplay at pre-release, maybe battles were worse, but they ended up playing great. So, I don't have as high hopes for this one, but I don't know. It'll be interesting.
You need pen and paper for this one, and this is a good example of that because you need to actually write down.
Well, you can tuck the cards under it because they're exiled.
Yeah, but. Yeah, there will be some chaos there.
Sure, absolutely. I think a big thing is in terms of evaluating these craft cards, I would urge players who are trying to evaluate these craft cards to ignore the back and decide if it's worth playing on the merit of the front side alone. Especially if it says craft with artifact. If it says creature, maybe you can take the back side into account, but you want to just evaluate the front side, kind of like how you look at a werewolf in Limited.
That's an interesting take, I think. Actually, the card that's on screen now is actually a good example of one that might be interesting because the backside is...
You think this will be playable?
It reminds me of a card from a recent set, which I don't know the name of now, but it was in Innistrad, where you had this mana guy, and if it was losing counters, and it would flip into a bigger creature.
Okay, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, but yeah, I mean...
That ended up playing quite well.
It flips into a 1/4 that attacks and... Oh, no. I'm thinking of the Shard of Emrakul or whatever.
That was a great card too, by the way.
It's like a 5/6 on the back that you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, that card was decent in that format. You're right. I did play very little of that format because of how bad it was, but
it's really hard to estimate right now how good you can craft this.
For sure.
What is the power and toughness going to be at the time you need this?
Oh, I forgot to mention this. Craft is only as a sorcery. That's very relevant. So yeah.
And they all read differently.
Yeah, they all say you're going to just be reading the reminder text on this every time you play one of these cards. This is a complicated mechanic.
Yeah.
Next, we'll talk about Discover. We've got this is a new mechanic, and this is really interesting to me because it's essentially a fixed version of Cascade. So the difference is Discover has a number attached to it, right? So Discover 4, Discover 3, whatever. So it'll tell you what to grab instead of just that costs less than the cascading spell, and it's not a cast trigger anymore. It triggers or is activated a different way on each card. So there's creatures that do it when they're into the battlefield. There's these lands that you sack and they discover. There's a lot of different versions. What's crazy to me is that they fixed... They believe they say that they fixed Cascade with this mechanic, but you can still hit Crashcade. You can still hit Crashing Footfalls, which means that they couldn't really print anything that discovers 2 or less. So I feel like they've kind of kneecapped themselves for the future design of this mechanic.
I think the fix is actually that you can put the card in your hand.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is for your instants and sorceries or whatever.
So if you had a counter spell or a removal spell you don't want to use yet, you can put it in your hand rather than casting it. That's definitely nice.
Yeah, which actually is then sort of the counter opposite to craft, that this might speed up the games quite a bit.
Potentially.
This breaks board states.
I do think they have used Discover very sparingly. It is not an archetype mechanic of the set, so they don't have to give it the as fan that they give to like some of the other new mechanics. It is kind of fewer and further between and on a lot more janky cards. Like the Swashbuckler's Whip, you're not going to use, But I do think with these caves especially, which I know you're very high on and we'll get into a discussion of later, the Discover mechanic will be relevant, but I don't think it'll feel back-breaking necessarily, because there's not really any repeated Discovers.
Yeah, and I think the difference between Discover 4 and Discover 10 is very minor.
Right, because a lot of the time, Discover 10 is probably going to get you a 3-drop.
Yeah.
Most of these Discovers are going to get you a 3-drop or a 2-drop if they can.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing with Discover.
I think it'll be really cool.
I rate it really highly, so
I agree.
On the front side of the set.
Yeah. And then we'll get into the new mechanic, Caves. This is less a mechanic and more just a marker, similar to Gate. There are these lands. They have kind of a running theme of caring about the graveyard. A lot of them, care that caves are in your graveyard. There's some cards that care about caves in the set, and we'll get into that later. There's sort of a secret deck, so to speak. But the caves, each pack will have, instead of a basic land, either 1/3 or 2/3 of the time, there will be a cave instead. So these will be at a higher ratio of availability than most common and uncommon non-basic lands in a format. And some of these have some play. The ones I really want to point out would be these hidden lands. One was in the last slide. They let you pay 5 tap, sack them to discover. They're monocolor lands that come in tapped. Patrick, your thoughts on caves? Not these ones specifically, because we'll get into that later.
We really have to evaluate the cards to see if this secret deck is not a trap.
Right.
But I believe so. It's good info that you mentioned that there's at least one in every pack. So that probably will mean there's like 12 to 14.
Yeah, they'll be higher. They'll appear more often in draft than you're used to. Think of like March of the Machine. How often there were the life lands. So it's very easy to play 3 colors in that set. The caves will be appearing at roughly that ratio, it seems.
Yeah, which means that it's readily available for everyone to have at least 2 or 3 of these, probably.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, I'm going to be looking for a hidden land no matter what archetype I'm playing, really. So if you're the cave deck, you kind of have to snap those up earlier, so you're giving up actual spell picks. It's going to be a delicate balance, but we'll talk about that more later. The people know what caves are now, so we'll
I think so.
Yeah. So now we're going to move on to the best commons and uncommons of each color. Now I made this, and Patrick generally agreed with my list. So we're going to talk about the 3 best commons and 3 best uncommons in each color. You want to take turns reading them, and then we'll talk about them. So you can go first with this first one.
So the first one is Cosmian Blast, 1 and a white for an instant. That says Cosmian Blast deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature.
Very bread and butter. Gideon's Reproach. I think it's literally a functional reprint of Gideon's Reproach. Just the white removal spell for this set. Not much to say about it.
We have seen a lot of these iterations of a card like this with 3 damage, right? Even if it was 1 or 2 mana.
Usually with like a rider you gain 2 life, or you can bargain it. But I just like the 4 damage.
Yeah, I think there is quite a step up from 4 from 3. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And as we might see going through this set, that there's not that much enormous creatures, it feels like. Not as much with previous Ixalan, where we had a ton of big dinosaurs.
I do think there is a fair share of that. I think the highlight of going up from 4 to 3 damage is that on turn 4, you can play a 2-drop, which your deck's going to be full of, and then leave this up to answer their 4-drop and feel pretty good about that exchange.
And that with the 1 mana iteration of that card where it does 3 damage or 2 mana does 3 damage, you tend to miss more often, I think.
Absolutely,
and this one is quite good.
Yeah. So next is Oltec Cloud Guard. I love the art. He's riding a bat. Shout out to Evan Fong here. Beautiful art. 3 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier with flying. When Oltec Cloud Guard enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. So reminds us of Preening Champion from March of the Machine, which was a very good blue common there.
Dunland Crabane.
Yeah, Dunland Crabane. If you like Universes Beyond, this channel is officially anti-Universes Beyond, but. This is, the artifact status of the gnome matters quite a bit for one of the archetypes. I think you're going to be happy to get any number of these in your white deck. Thoughts?
Yeah, the fact that it's an artifact is important here, I think, as well. These cards have just been performing so well, and this is actually a 3/2, so it's quite of an aggressive card as well.
Yeah, flyer and a 1/1 is always pretty solid. And then your next one.
Oltec Archaeologists, 4 and a white, a creature, human artificer scout. When Oltec Archaeologist enters the battlefield, choose 1, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, or scry 3, and it's a 4/4.
Yeah, I tend to feel like these 4/4s for 5 with a little bit of rider text on them are really helpful. Scry 3 is digging deep enough that I'm not missing that last power and toughness. And the ability to return the artifact from the graveyard to the hand, they're in white. If this was red, that'd be amazing because there's ways to discard them.
Yeah.
But in white, it's not that bad either. There's plenty of decent artifact creatures in the set, so those will get into the graveyard naturally by dying, and you can return those. Bottom line, if you're using the first mode, you feel great. If you're using the second mode on this, you still feel good.
Yeah, I feel like the return target artifact card is being underappreciated probably in the beginning of this format, but I feel like the artifact deck might actually be a thing here.
And
in combination with red, which we'll discuss later, if you can get a good 2 or 3 drop back from this, that's actually very good.
I think broadly speaking, this format will change a lot across its lifespan because there's a lot of stuff to chew through, a lot of things to figure out. So I think the format will look very different when we start drafting it to when we're done drafting it. And I think that Artifacts of the Graveyard is going to be another example. Like this card will be evaluated differently.
And I think Scry, I always look at it as almost something that is nearing exponential, right? If you go from 1 to 2. 2 is way better than Scry.
Yeah, and Scry 3 is like insane. Is like I'm late in the game. I'm digging for a removal spell or I'm digging for a bomb.
You will put a good card on top.
Yeah, I'm trying to break parity. I'm gonna draw something good next turn. And then we've got the best uncommons in white, so I'll start with this doozy. Spring-loaded Sawblades, 1 and a white for an artifact with flash. When Spring-loaded Sawblades enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target tapped creature an opponent controls. So already kind of a one of those sort of Gideon's Reproach effects, right? But at a better rate, although it has to hit a tapped creature, so no vigilance and nothing that blocked, right? Yep. But then you've got Craft with Artifact, 3 and a white. So you have to exile an artifact, again, from your field or your graveyard. So you can use a map token or a treasure token, or you can, if you've had an artifact go in the graveyard earlier. And it flips into a 5/5 vehicle with crew 1, but you can also crew it by tapping 2 untapped artifacts you control. So if you have map or treasure tokens lying around, you can crew it without having to tap creatures, and then it is, again, a 5/5 vehicle. So I think this card is good enough on the front face, and the back side just, is a little bonus. What are your thoughts on it?
I think there will be plenty of games where it will just go, I can probably cast this on turn 2 or 3. You know, definitely if you're on the
3.
play, 3
sure.
most likely.
Yeah.
Kill something, and then immediately go into crafting it the next turn.
Close, yeah.
I mean, that will happen, and that will be a race that is very hard to beat.
Yeah, worth noting again that when you craft a card, you are exiling it and then returning it to the battlefield flip, so this will have summoning sickness the turn you craft it. But yes, definitely.
Yeah, and the tap 2 other untapped artifacts, we just have to see how readily available that is if you put that deck together. But that's the mechanic that they usually have to tap 2 other artifacts. I would like to refer back to the comment that we just saw with the 1/1 artifact token that it makes. It crews for 1.
Yeah, you can crew it. Well, you can crew this with a gnome. Yeah, that's true.
And if something else is going on, map tokens or something.
Yeah, crew with 2 maps, 2 treasures, whatever. Yeah.
I think this will go very fast because it's a removal spell first.
Right. So. Yeah. You can ignore the backside and it's still good, and if you don't ignore the backside, it's even better.
Second one up here is Ruin Lurker Bat for 1 white. Flying lifelink, 1/1, creature bat. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, scry 1.
So descend, again, for a reminder, is if a permanent card was put in your graveyard from anywhere.
Yeah, so no map tokens or no...
Right, it does not count tokens. Very unintuitive.
That's what people have been falling over a lot in the beginning. But yeah, this is, again, an example of how they've been pushing 1-drops this last 3-4 years, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna really I would compare it to like Beloved Princess or Healer's Hawk or the Skulk lifelink vampire from Eldritch Moon. It's very much this sort of, I really want to play it on turn 1, and it can make a huge life swing if I'm on the beatdown before the game really feels like it's even started. Just kind of give you that leg up.
And even if you get like 2 scries out of it, this card is, I mean, we've seen some good run-drops recently.
Yeah, you do have to trade on your turn to get that descended because it is only on your end step, but still very, very helpful.
I'm very high on this one, I think.
Yeah, and then next we've got Kinjali's Dawnrunner. Now this is 2 and a white for a 1/1 human scout with double strike. When Kinjali's Dawnrunner enters the battlefield, it explores. So a 3-mana 1/1 double strike, draw a card. Friend of the show, Combat Thresher is very, very good. One of my favorite cards in recent limited formats in my cube. Just a classic. And the possibilities, so if this draws a land, it's going to be Combat Thresher. If it doesn't, it's going to be 3-mana 2/2 double strike, which I generally feel pretty good about. The lack of control over it, right? You look at these explore things and you think if this was modal, it'd be insane. It's a little less insane since you don't get to pick, but definitely happy to have this.
I feel like I'm sometimes a bit lower on these double strikers because they come in undercostedly, right? It's often a 3-mana, 1 power, and you need to put some work in to make its power bigger and actually hit hard. But this set might have an aura or 2 or an equipment or 2 that make this very interesting.
Yeah, I think also with map tokens, right? Those make these understated double strikers better because this is a great target to have explore.
Yeah, if you can, exactly. So if you have more Explorer going on, don't rely on its own Explorer to do the trick for you, because that might be, you're can be very often stuck with a 1/1.
And same thing even with the Ruin Lurker Bat, right? It's common knowledge that the more keywords something has, the better of a target for buffs it is. So these map tokens really put a premium on these creatures that have keywords that make their power give you more bang for each point of power.
Yeah. Putting this at uncommon is something that is might be an indication that
you think that this might have been an common in development and got moved up to uncommon because of the synergies?
It would be an example of that for me because of course Explorer is a mechanic, so they know the buffing is there, but with all the map tokens going around, they probably figured out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's on to the next color. And Patrick, I know you're very hyped on this card, so you get to read it.
I think I have one common that is probably close to this one for best common of the set, but this is a Didact Echo for 4 in a blue. A 3/2 Spirit Clerk. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and descend 4. It has flying as long as there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. I just have a soft spot for creatures that gain flying over time for some reason and are sort of undercosted, because I think drawing a card in 5/3/2 is probably
I remember
would have been
you
good already.
Beating my ass with Wonder in it was either Dominaria Remastered or a Modern Horizons 2 draft.
Was a Modern Horizons 2 draft.
That Creatures gaining flying is pretty good. I am a sucker for, this is kind of a joining of our two interests, because I love Pizza Rhinos, right? The 5-mana creature in the set or 4-mana creature in the set. Usually it's in green, sometimes it's in blue. That is just slightly below stats, but you get to draw that sweet, sweet card in the middle of the game where it's very important because maybe you're in need of a removal spell. And that's really what I'm seeing here, is that a 5-mana 3/2 that draws a card is just barely good enough. And then that ability to gain flying really brings it home.
Yeah, I think it just sort of stabilizes your decks after deck building, right? If you have a few good cards in there, a bomb or two, cards that you really want to see, these cards just generally play out well.
Absolutely.
They break a tie in a game, right?
Yes.
If the next draw is a good one.
Absolutely.
And this one has a second way of doing it by when it's later in the game.
Yeah.
4 permanent cards doesn't seem like a whole lot.
Not hard at all.
In Limited.
Yeah.
So this will be a flyer very
yes,
often.
Absolutely. And next, speaking of cards that really smooth out your deck, your draws, we've got River Herald Scout, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 Merfolk Scout. When River Herald Scout enters the battlefield, it explores. So I think it's good to look at this as either, the modes are a 2-mana 2/3 that surveils, or a 2-mana 1/2 that draws a card, a little better than Elvish Visionary, which I tend to be happy to play in Limited. So I think it's great. The fact you don't get to choose between those two, a little rough, right? It's just whatever's on top. But I think this is the blue 2-drop, right? And you play as many of these as you can get in a blue deck in Limited, and that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, no, it's exploring on turn 2 feels extra good. Because you're not really sure where your hand is going at that time.
Oh, yeah. It's giving you... This is going to let you keep 2 landers that you maybe would feel on the fence about on the play. Yeah,
so... and then it becomes a 3/2 for 2, which is...
a 2/3, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 2/3 for 2, yeah. And that's very often... a good position to be in if you can play this on turn 2 anyway.
Yeah, 2/3s for 2 have just traditionally been very consistent. Even when we look at the Witch Stalker from last set, much better than a red. I think this is no different.
There seem to be quite a bit of 3/2s going around. I've seen in set 2 examples right here.
Especially 3-drop 3/2s. So this can trade up after surveilling for you.
Yeah. I mean, and the best case scenario is that it holds back a 2/2 or something.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But you don't have full control over that, but with all the other Explore going around, this is not a...
Definitely.
This is a good 2-drop, yeah.
Definitely. And then...
final one here is Sage of Days. For 2 and a blue, creature human wizard at common, 3/2, which is notable that it's a 3/2 for a card that does the following. When it ETBs, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library, put the rest in your graveyard. So it's good filtering. Yeah,
I'm really curious why they didn't just put Surveil 3 on this. This seems like way more text just to take away a tiny bit of the freedom of where you put the cards.
Yeah, they have these rules they follow themselves, right? If they put in a mechanic, they have to put on the explanatory text.
Well, there's a couple Surveil cards in the set.
Is there a couple Surveil cards?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evergreen mechanic now. So
that's true, actually. Yeah, because that was my point. If it's not evergreen, then they don't do it. But, I don't know.
But design weirdness aside, what's your evaluation of this card's power level?
I would have expected this to be a 1/3 or something.
Really?
Yeah, and this being a 3/2 makes it a lot better on curve. Somehow it seems like blue is it shows a little bit of aggression here, which we are not used to.
Yeah, I think most of your deck's going to be permanents in this format too. Yes. So this being... you may put one of those cards on the back and top of your library. If you're desperate to descend, you can dump all 3 of them. But often you're going to be picking the best card, putting it on top, and then often putting 2 permanents in your graveyard. And that's halfway to the descend 4 mark by itself, which is, one of the high marks you're trying to hit.
Yeah, because don't forget, for descent, it looks at permanent cards. So even if you throw the lands away...
Exactly, yes.
And probably at turn 3... In comparison to the River Herald Scout in turn 2, you'll probably know if you have the mana to do what you need to do. So if you just throw away 2 lands, you're in good shape.
I think you're absolutely right.
Like this sort of on curve that we see from these 3 comments would be fantastic.
Right, my opening hand of these 3 cards on the screen right now on 4 lands feels pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, so those are our blue commons. Now we're going to get into our blue uncommons. We've got a reprint. This card's actually in my cube. Pioneer favorite. Chart a Course. 1 and a blue for a sorcery from the original Ixalan originally. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless you attacked this turn. You look at similar cards semi-recently, things like Winged Words. Basically, the divination variants that either reduce the cost and give a drawback like this one, or keep the same cost and give a tiny buff like the instant one we saw in Wilds of Eldraine most recently, tend to be on the cusp of playable. Maybe you like one, maybe you don't want to see it. Chart, of course, I'm happy to have 2 of in a limited format. Just the crazy, like 2 mana to draw 2 cards is just great value, and this is one of the easiest conditions to meet to make that happen. Your thoughts, Patrick?
How easy it is to meet these conditions depends on the format, right?
Sure.
So far, it seems like aggro will not be running wild, maybe.
I agree. I don't think aggro is very good in this format.
It's about long-term value and, grinding your opponents out, at least at first impression here.
Sure.
And we'll have some more examples of that later.
Right.
Then this goes down a little bit, because there's usually no clear attacks on turn 3, 4 that you just can keep attacking. Like
right.
It was with, for example, 1 recently.
Yeah. But I often feel good playing this on turn 5 and then
Sure.
playing a 3-drop.
Sure.
Right?
And it is a pet card of mine. I even play this in Commander because I love the card. So. Yeah. This will be good, especially because it's 2 mana. But yeah, it depends a little bit on if the blue decks are able to attack or not.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I do think, we look at a couple of the cheap flyers in this format, or even the creature right after that's very easy to get an attack in with, and that makes me feel a little more optimistic about Chart a Course, but I understand caution.
Yeah, and this next card is Hermetic Nautilus for 1 and a blue, and that is quite a low cost for what we're about to get. It's a 1/4 Vigilance artifact creature, also an artifact, Nautilus, and for 1 and a blue, it gains +3, -3, so it becomes a 4/1.
Yeah, it has Vigilance as well.
Yeah. And that's what makes it easy to get the attacks in. And something that is always hard to explain to new players that start drafting is that these cards tend to play better than they seem at first hand.
Yeah, that freedom with the mana sink, like you think this is basically a 4-drop, but it's not.
And it can kill like a 4/4, 5/4, whatever as well.
Yeah.
By doing this on the other player's turn. So, and this is only 2 mana.
Yeah, this is a great card for explaining the concept of threat of activation to a newer player, where they have to block as if you're going to do that ability. So a lot of the power from the ability doesn't even come from activating it. It just comes from the fact that you can activate it, and that they have to block accordingly. So you're going to get that 1 damage in more often than you think if they don't want to trade their 4/4.
Yeah, and it's a typical turtle, right? It holds... It completely nullifies combat.
Right, your opponent's 2-drops, even 3-drops, are going to be blanked by this a lot of the time. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very high on this, actually. This is going to be annoying to play against.
As am I, for sure. I think it's quite good. Coming up next, we've got Sinuous Benthesor, 5 and a blue for a 4/4 dinosaur. When Sinuous Benthesor enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of caves you control plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard. Put 2 of those cards in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That is a lot of text. What this basically says, I'll simplify it a little for you. If you have a cave on the field and a cave in your graveyard, or 2 caves on the field, 2 caves in your graveyard, whatever, 2 caves between those 2 zones, then this is a 6 mana 4/4 that draws 2 cards. Harkens back to Phyrexian Gargantua, thank you. It was escaping me. Where you have this decently sized creature that is giving you a divination on enters the battlefield, kind of guaranteeing that you have some action the following turn at the part of the game where you're maybe trying to close things out or come back. I think this card's great. I don't think it's going to be that hard to get those 2 caves, especially with the preponderance of them being in the packs, right, with that extra slot. So I'm pretty high on Sinuous Benthesor. Patrick?
Compared to Gargantua, this has only 1 blue. So I think that is, a good thing that you don't have to be fully in blue to play this. If it's as good as Gargantua, I've played 2 or 3 Gargantuas easily in many drafts.
That is lost in the sauce, I think.
It just worked out fine. I think the card was that good.
All right.
The card was that good.
I love 2.
I'm not sure if this is as good because it's conditional, right?
Right, sure.
But if you get 1 or 2 caves pack 1, And even if you're not fully in blue, I might even consider, putting this in as your high end. If you know you have a few gates and go into 3 colors and this being the one you go for. I think it's good enough for that.
I think that's the hottest take so far in this episode, yeah. But you may be right.
But that is...
I do think splashing is a lot harder in this format than it was in Wilds of Eldraine.
Yes.
But I also thought it was going to be harder in Wilds of Eldraine than it was. So maybe
we played Bant all the time, I think. So.
I was all over Bant in that format. I underevaluated the... grab a land, but this isn't the Wilds of Eldraine struggle session. We are...
So I think because it's conditional, it's a bit lower than Gargantua.
For sure.
If this plays out as Gargantua, I will be all over this card.
Yeah, and then of course there's the possibility of more caves. You get to filter which 2 cards you take, which we don't need to tell you. That's obviously good. But I'm trying to look at the wall of the card rather than the ceiling. Obviously the floor is that it's a 6-mana 4/4, but ideally you can draft enough caves where you won't be in that situation.
I like the flavor that's an aquatic dinosaur, which we didn't have many for last time we were in Ixalan.
I don't have glasses to push up the bridge of my nose, but these are technically not dinosaurs.
No, that's true.
They're prehistoric creatures, and no one gives a shit. Best black commons. Go ahead.
Join the Dead, and this is an absolute banger for 1 and 2 black. Target creature gets -5 until end of turn at instant speed. And if that wasn't enough, Descent 4, again, here we go. 4 is not as much, especially later in the game. That creature gets -10 until end of turn instead. So if there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, so I'm really getting Tragic Slip vibes from this. But the base...
Way better, I think.
But the base is already -5, so this balance is better. And -10 kills everything, so...
Yeah, nearly everything. I think there might be some unfortunate rares or mythics this can't deal with. But, I think this card is great. I don't have that much to add. I think thinking about the play pattern of the card, -5 is going to kill anything until you are at a point in the game where you definitely have Descend 4. Like, at the point where you need more than -5, the game has gone long enough that you have 4 permanents in your graveyard. So I think this is... the best black removal spell. I think it's better than the uncommon one. That's kind of the default. So I think it's great.
Yeah, they made it double black for a reason, so that it's more fit for black players. And it kills a dinosaur in the end of the game.
Yeah,
that's what the art shows.
Absolutely. So. And then next we've got Primordial Gnaw, 4 and a black for a 5/2 insect horror with Discover 3 when it dies. So I think this card's just the best sort of black creature for the top end. You're going to feel great about any number of these that you have. Just the fact that when it dies, you're going to get probably a 2-drop creature on average, or maybe a Join the Dead, right? Yeah. And then you can use it right there, or you can stick it in your hand. So I think Primordial Gnaw, just a great card. Not much to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, but if you get a removal spell like Join the Dead, you probably just kill their 2 best creatures.
Yeah, I think so.
So that is fantastic. Yeah, and it's good that they made the toughness lower, because otherwise this would have been pushing it.
This card is going to feel like Thragtusk some of the time.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the comparison that jumps to mind for me.
Is there a way of bringing this back reliably? Using spells.
There's a Reanimator spell that's like 6 mana, 5 or 6 mana uncommon. Bring a creature back and it explores twice.
This is a good target.
Yeah, it's a fine target for sure. I'm never high on Reanimation Unlimited, but I think
they probably made it a bit less common as well because of cards like this.
Yeah.
Because the value stacks up so highly.
Super high value for sure. And then you've got the next one. This card is maybe the one I'm the most excited to play in Limited, so do it justice.
Titan Blade, 1 and a black. When Titan Blade enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And it has Craft with Creature, 4 and a black. And then it becomes one of Fred's favorite types of cards.
I love these bleeder effects.
At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life.
Music to my ears. My favorite bad Limited format is Ravnica Allegiances. Yeah. That limited format slurped turds, but the Ill-Gotten Inheritance, as bad as it was for that format and as nutty as the commons in Orzhov were, the mirror match of that in that draft format was so fucking fun. And Consuming Sepulchre, these style of cards, Dogged Pursuit in Kaldheim, things like that.
That performed a lot better than people expected in the beginning.
For me, yeah, and I think people were still low on it toward the end of the format, but I loved it. But anyway, I love these cards. So an Edict, and then Craft with a Creature, which, remember, they can take it from the graveyard. I think this is so much easier to do than Craft with an Artifact. You're going to hit, you get that Edict, and then when nothing's going on later, you put out this artifact that's going to win you the game eventually.
Yeah, I feel like this card is made for aggro decks somehow. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The combination of, coming into this grindy board state and then, the backside being an advantage to you in the long run. And an edict tends to work well when you're attacking into the opponent and the opponent doesn't have like a wall of creatures left, right?
So you're imagining this consuming sepulture giving you the last couple points to win the game?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can buy that for sure. I'm thinking like more of a mid-range or control deck where this is kind of your win condition. You're sitting behind a bunch of removal spells and maybe some big toughness creatures.
If it ends up being good in both, pick it early.
yeah. I think the point is this card is good everywhere and you're very happy to have it.
Yeah. The thing is, you need to have a creature in your graveyard somehow. I would say I would not. I don't see you envisioning exiling. Well, if it's a 1/1, maybe.
Patrick, there's this really cool mechanic in this game called combat, and when two creatures with the same power and toughness hit each other, they both go to the graveyard. It's kind of crazy.
That's why I'm saying I'm more inclined to say it will be good in the aggro strategies, where this probably at turn 5 you have one in there. At least. So, and in a mid-range strategy, with the way I see this format right now, you might not have it yet, and you don't want to sack the creature yet. I don't know if that is...
I don't think so. I think there's a ton of milling and discarding that you would be doing, and I really think it'll be easy. I think by the time you have 5 mana, you're able to activate this if it's what you want to do, and I think a lot of the time it is.
Yeah.
So, those are the black commons.
Yeah.
I've got the first black uncommon, Bitter Triumph. 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or pay 3 life. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. This is just sort of the default removal spell. Compare it to Feed the Swarm, it's probably about as good. Compare it to, what was the spell from Zendikar that was just 1 and a black, you lose 2 life, destroy a creature or planeswalker?
Yeah.
The modality of getting to discard a card if you care about Descend and you have like a land you don't need is cool. I don't know if that makes it worth being 3 life instead of 2 life, but either way, you're happy to have a good number of these just because it's Doomblade with a meaningful downside.
Yeah, and I mean it's any creature, right? Except for a creature with hexproof or indestructible.
Sure,
so it's basically everything, and the discard card here is going to be relevant, I think.
Yeah, and if your opponent gets Quintorius, this can also destroy him.
That will be one of the feel bads of the format, I think.
I will feel great if my opponent has Quintorius and I destroy it with Bitter Triumph. The person playing him, I guess, but I don't need to worry about that.
Because this uncommon actually limits planeswalkers quite a bit. Not that there are many.
Sure,
but,
right. There's 1, but
Yeah.
So I think this card's all right. This next one is sort of a retrain of a fan favorite from original Ixalan. Read this one to us.
Was it a fan favorite or a fan hated?
Oh, I loved it.
Okay, well,
I love Necrotals.
It's called Chupacabra Echo for 2 and 2 black, and it has Fathomless Descent, another different wording on the descent mechanic. When Chupacabra Echo enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and it's a 3/2. So it's also a little bit better.
Yeah, so 1 more power than the original Chupacabra. This is, I think, maybe a little more like Flametongue Kavu than like the Chupacabra. For those who don't know, that was a 4-mana 2/2 that destroyed a creature when it came in. So it didn't care about the number of cards in your graveyard, but had 1 less power. Didn't get around indestructible, although that's hardly relevant. I think this card's great. I think you're going to be happy to have any number of these, because even just killing your opponent's 2-drop is going to feel great, and when you can do more, which will be pretty often, this card feels nutty.
Yeah, there is just one phase in the middle of the game where this might not work, right?
Yeah.
Because of the descent mechanic, and it's just not big enough to kill their 4/4 or something.
Sure.
But other than that, in the end of the game, it will just be destroy target creature again, basically.
Yeah, so. I think when we look at the best uncommons in each color in this slideshow, we're really looking at 3 cards that just won't wheel. So that's kind of where you're looking at these, where if you see them and you want them, you have to take them now.
Yeah, this is easily first pickable, I think.
I wouldn't feel too bad about that either. I do think there's not very many bad rares in this set, so you often are like pack one, pick one, taking your rare here, because there's a little bit less commander cards, thank God. But I think this is, you're gonna feel fine about pack one, pick one-ing this. And then next we got Synapse Necromage, real freaky art here by Peter Fokowicz.
One of the freakiest, yeah.
Yeah, very strange art. I like it. 2 and a black for a 3/1 Fungus Wizard. That's what they call me. When Synapse Necromage dies, create 2 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block. So think the rats from Wilds of Eldraine. Trading and leaving behind 2 little guys that you can sack in the sack deck, or that you can craft with, I guess. If you're going to craft with a creature from your battlefield, it's going to be one of these. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's 2 tokens. That is
2 tokens.
Definite upside from what we've usually seen with these. And yeah, it's another high school nickname.
Yeah, Fungus Whistle.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking Synapse Necromage.
Oh, sure.
So, now this... and it's 3 power, so it trades quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well. Trade with their 3-drop lead behind 2/1/1s. You're going to feel great about that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the red commons. This is you. We've seen this card a lot lately, and I'm pretty happy about that. I think it's a good role filler.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like they should even give these cards just a new name at some point, even though they're the same text. Yeah,
I really like when they just use the same name so that it's just a reprint and you don't have to worry about 6 cards to do the same thing.
It wouldn't be problematic anywhere, right? If you had 8 Abrades, because we're talking about Abrade here. 1 in the red, choose 1. Abrade deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact.
And it's an instant.
And it's an instant, yes. So it's the best lightning strike variety we've ever had, except for lightning
strike. Yeah. I think the destroy an artifact will be more relevant here than in many formats.
Exactly.
I think they're kind of alternating design wise between like sets with enough artifacts that you would play artifact removal on your main board and sets with enough enchantments that you'd play enchantment removal on your main board.
Yeah.
Thinking of things like Wilds of Eldraine, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty kind of being both. And I like that design trend because naturalize effects have always felt bad to draft, but also bad to not have. So cards like Abrade showing up more often, I think, is just really good for the game.
Yeah, I think this is pushing it even. I think because the having the choice that it's just a 3-mana removal spell, which you will always play.
Right.
I mean, this will be in the first 3-4 picks in every pack. This card will be gone.
Yeah.
But now having the choice to destroy, something that is one of the more common other card types in this set, at least it seems like so far.
Right, the backside of all the crafts. Yeah, absolutely.
And some tokens that are made and other things, even if you really need to.
Yeah.
So
and then we've got Atali's Favor.
Your pet card.
I think this card's really cool. I really just want to see how good it is. I'm not staking my claim on this, but I will say I want to see how good it is. It's 2 in a red for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control. When Atali's Favor enters the battlefield, discover 3. So that's kind of the cascade, except you can put it in your hand instead. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. So Patrick had an observation about this that I wanted to share.
Yeah, it feels like some of the Wilds of Eldraine cards that are like 3-mana, 2-mana creatures that give you a roll token on something else, right? So that is if you hit a creature from the discover,
right?
Which is a big if, but you might hit something even better.
It's going to be a creature or a removal spell. I mean, it's limited. If you're hitting something you don't want off of this, then it's because you put it in your deck, right?
Like, yeah, sure. So it will.
Are you hitting an equipment, maybe?
So let's say you get a 1/2, a 2/2 out of this for 2 mana.
For 3 mana,
Yeah, or that's
and then the other.
That's the thing you hit, and something else gets a monster roll, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, and then you have the pretty relevant option to kind of high roll this, right? Hit a 3-drop and have the +1/+1 and trample for free.
Yeah, and I'm thinking what kind of 3-drops did we see? Well, the 3/3 blue one that filters your deck, for example.
Right. Yeah. I think here you're just trading. You're trading some control over what you get for a pretty good chance at higher power here. A higher rate. So I'm high on the card. I think it'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think on curve this is probably powerful as well, because if you did play a 2-drop before this, that will be the biggest creature on the battlefield then.
Yeah, and you can safely swing in, and then you got an extra thing. Yeah. I think I agree with you on that. Then you've got the next card.
Panicked Altasaur, 4 in a red, creature dinosaur, reach, 4/5, but it has a tap ability. Panicked Altasaur deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is a blast to the past as well. With the card that we had, and you reminded me that was a 5/4 actually.
Yeah, Onake Javeliner from March of the Machine. This is just that with the stats swapped. And I think that's better because for the play pattern of this card, where you're just sitting behind it and eating attackers or making them not want to attack and just pinging them for 2 to have that clock, a 4/5 is obviously better than a 5/4 in that case.
Yeah, and that card played a lot better than was expected as well. I was not high on that card in the beginning, or like mediocre.
I think some of that was the card being good, and some of that just being red having a distinct lack of cards you're excited to play at 5 and 6 mana in that set. But that's getting in the weeds.
But I think that was supposed to be the one you were supposed to be excited about.
Sure.
Having, even having 2 of those and them coming out, that was very good.
Yeah.
Like, that is a race the opponent will likely not win anymore.
Yeah, I'll point out here that the creature type is also quite relevant on this, where it wasn't there. So Dinosaur is one of the limited archetypes, is Dinosaur Tribal. So, that'll come up reasonably often. There's some cards that care about it that are pretty good. So, yeah, that's Panicked Altasaur. Now we're going to talk about the best uncommons in red, and I'm pretty glad I get to read this. I didn't plan this, but Geological Appraiser, a.k.a. Bad Braid Elf, 2 and double red for a 3/2 Human Artificer. When Geological Appraiser enters the battlefield, if you cast it, discover 3. Now, there are some cards where if you squint at them, it's a Blood Braid Elf. This is maybe the one you have to squint at the least. It lacks haste, and you do get it as an enter the battlefield instead of a cast trigger. It has the marginally relevant fact of Discover allowing you to put the card in your hand instead, right? If you hit something you don't want to immediately have in play. But the play pattern on this in practice is going to be that it's a 4-mana 3/2 that gets you a 2-drop, or that removes something maybe. And I think this card is first pickable 100% of the time you play any number of copies you get. It's just an excellent 4-drop. It's not going to feel like an uncommon.
Yeah, also, again, don't forget with Discover that you don't lose the other cards. They just go back into your deck in random order. Like, it's just,
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's true with Cascade, too. But you're not having to exile them or anything.
Like, you cannot have enough Discover, in fact. It's just extra value on the cards. And this will guarantee your board will be bigger than your opponent's if you play this on turn 4.
Yes, absolutely.
You will either get a removal spell again or a smaller creature that will join as well, and you will have 3 or 4 creatures and your opponent will have 2.
This card just absolutely puts you firmly in the pilot seat. Yeah. This feels like a little version of Itali Primal Storm from March of the Machine, which everyone loved and no one was mad about.
Well, will this be a frustrating card to play against?
I really don't think so. I think this will be one of those cards that doesn't feel as bad to lose to.
It's not common
because the power's a little. They don't have one card to point at and go, that card, like with a Gruff Triplets or a Dream Trawler or whatever. It'll just be the fact that and when this comes down on turn 4, it's not deciding the game immediately.
Sure.
It's not one of those cards that someone can point to and go, this card lost me the game. It just puts them in the pilot seat to the point where the game is kind of sneakily unwinnable for you.
Yeah, so it will be frustrating to play against.
Well, I don't think people will realize that this is the thing, No, that's my take.
This is one of the highest rated cards in the beginning of the format, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this is the highest win rate uncommon in the set. Even better than a removal spell, obviously, because if you have a removal spell and you're staring down this, you're losing. Yeah.
Getting a braid off this is just backbreaking.
Yeah, or trying to abrade this feels awful because there's the other 3 mana.
Yeah, or getting this next card, which is called Belligerent Yearling. 1 and a red, a creature dinosaur, a 3/2 with trample. Whenever another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Belligerent Yearling's base power become equal to that creature's power at the end of turn. This thing beats hard, I think.
Yeah, I think that extra text is going to be stupid with a 6 or 7 power creature, which there are several of at common and uncommon. But even without that text, a 2-mana 3/2 trample feels great. You're going to love discovering this. You're going to love just playing it on turn 2.
This is a must interact with for the opponent, I would go.
I think so, yeah, because
they don't know what's coming.
It doesn't feel great to spend a removal spell on it, but they can't afford for you to play a Colossal Dreadmaw and then hit him for 6 off of your 2-drop.
The 2 toughness remains, so it's it is vulnerable in some sense.
Right, but the trample makes that 2 toughness feel a lot less bad because they can't. If you turn this into a 6/2, they can't just block it with a 2/2, or they're taking real damage.
And there is a few I'm not trying to pull the card down because I think this is one of the most aggressive cards that is there.
For sure.
But there's a few shock-like effects that you might get a feel bad playing this and just gets killed by a random removal spell because I think the opponent has to.
Yeah, but if your opponent has to use a removal spell on it, then they traded a removal spell for your 2-drop. Yeah. And if you're using removal spells on a 2-drop, you're not in the pilot seat.
No, that's why it's on this list.
Yeah, for sure. And then we've got this last uncommon, Diamond Pickaxe. The Minecraft crossover has already started. It's a single red for an equipment with Indestructible. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever it attacks, you get a treasure token, and then this equips for 2. So Patrick's very low on equipments. I'm generally low on equipments, but I think that this card fills a lot of niche. Equipments are good because there's a whole archetype that's centered around tapping artifacts, and equipments don't care if they're tapped at all. So, this is a free way to do that. The treasure tokens can be crafted as artifacts, right? And then they can be tapped for that same deck that we were talking about. So I think this card has a lot of hidden utility that people are not going to give it sort of the weight that it deserves early in the draft format. And I'm excited to kind of exploit that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Fred, you've done a few draft sims already. Mm-hmm. How many treasure-making stuff is there around this time? Because we have not seen a lot on the cards we have highlighted here.
Sure.
But I think people might be underestimated that it's still a good thing.
Yeah, Red has a few of them. I think you're going to kind of look back to maybe the Lord of the Rings format. You've got a few ways to make treasures there that, I would kind of liken the amount of treasure you're making here to that. It's not quite on the level of Adventures in the Forgotten Realm or Streets of New Capenna, but it's like just one rung below that, maybe like original Ixalan.
And it feels like the best way of fixing that is around.
I think you're gonna see this is gonna be a format where if you're trying to go into 3 colors, you're gonna be base red instead of base green.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
This card is weird design all over though. I think they're pushing equipments to be better and better.
Mm-hmm. You can't abrade this. Not that you would really feel great doing that in the first place.
No, with all the descent around as well. The indestructible might as well not be on there. I feel like
it's weird. Yeah,
I don't know what that's doing there. But the +1/+1 bonus is relevant on the equipment that you can play.
Yeah, I mean it's a short sword. I'm sometimes fine playing short sword in a format depending on the power level of the format, and the fact it makes a treasure token is good. The equip 2 is whatever. Yeah.
So I probably have to give this a try to know where this really is. But it seems like they pushed this. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for it. And then we've got the best commons in green. You get to read this absolute dealer.
Yeah, I have a hot take about these green commons because I'm missing one actually that I just got reminded of that I think should be in here actually. Okay. But we're going to that at the end maybe of these 3 ones because this next one is very good as well.
Yeah, this card is, nobody's going to try to be a contrarian about this. This card's good.
It's Cavern Stomper for 4 and 2 green. I like the dinosaur art on this one.
Yeah, it's very pretty. David Zaro.
Yeah. Zabo, I think.
Zabo. My apologies. David Zabo.
When it enters the battlefield, scry 2. That's already good. But it's also a 7/7 for 6.
Yeah. Burying the lead there.
And it has which at that time you can afford, for 4 mana, can be blocked by creatures power 2 or less this turn, which is an ability that turns up to be relevant now and then.
Yeah, I think it basically just lets it get rid of their gnomes, right? Like if they're planning to sit behind gnomes while they draw an answer to this, they can't. 6 mana 7/7 scry 2. A 6 mana 7/7 is good. A 6 mana 6/6 scry 2 is good, right? Like every possible little ounce of buff they gave this card, and they just gave it all of them. It kind of feels like Ragavan, right? Where you could take away the dash, you could take away the treasure, you could take away the peel off the top, and it would still be good. Like this is like the Ragavan of 6-drop commons.
Yeah, without all the text, you would play a 6 mana 7/7 in what the format looks like right now.
In any format, I can't think of a format I wouldn't play 6 mana 7/7.
It's getting closer to that. That will be very vanilla nowadays, I think, because they put so much text on everything.
Okay.
But this feels quite pushed because
maybe I'm stuck in 2015.
Yeah, we usually get iterations of these cards that gain you 3 life or 6 life even.
Thinking of maybe Cleanup Crew and New Capenna where it was a modal spell.
Yeah, but those cards were very relevant actually because they stabilize you also by gaining the life. And this one scries you too. That feels way better.
That feels better in a different way. I'm not going to feel great about this if I'm staring down a go wide aggro deck. It is just kind of let me look at the top 2 cards of my deck before I die. But you
should have more than 5 life when you play this guy.
Yeah, and the other thing is I don't think aggro is going to be as good in this format. So if you're topping your curve with a 7/7 that digs for a removal spell, and your opponent's topping their curve with some other bozo, then this is gonna feel great. I think this card is pretty self-evidently good. You don't need us to tell you Cavern Stomper is good, but crazy common. And then next we've got Pathfinding Axejaw, 3 and a green for a 4/3 dinosaur. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So a lot of the time a 5/4, a lot of the time a 4/3 that draws you a land. Not much to say here. This is just kind of the bread and butter green 4-drop.
It mixed very well with the Cavern Stomper in any way because it explores.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of getting you up to that 5th land, and 6th land to play.
People were very high on this one on the internet, just general, because it feels like this card will be a 5/4. This will be the aggro card, you want to go into.
Yeah, kind of.
But then it's just I'm not so high on it because it's just a vanilla creature. Explore is very good, so that's the good card.
Sure.
But I don't see with what we've seen so far, like green seems to be the color again that goes big, right? And wins through that way. Also big with many of the rares they have. I don't think this will be relevant if it's a 5/4 on turn 4. I don't think it's that. Really? I don't think it's. I think it will run into things.
Okay. We'll have to see. Worth noting that, like, even if this gets the counter off of Explore, it still dies to the white removal spell that kills
and a braid,
attacking or blocking creature. A braid if it doesn't explore.
You will actually. I think you're actually hoping that this will successfully explore in that sense that it will get a +1/+1 counter.
Right, and then it can't get a braid unless they do it.
But then
in
still,
response.
I don't know if it's enough to make aggressive decks.
Okay, yeah, I'm willing to buy that. I'm not low on this card. I'm happy to have one or two, but I'm not hurting for it in the way that I feel I would be for some of the other cards. Yeah. But it's definitely it's definitely in the top 3.
It's a dinosaur with a flashlight, though. So
that's we needed that in Magic. And then you get to read the next one.
Yeah.
I love this art.
Yeah, this somehow feels close to the previous card to me, but this is Malamet Veteran. It's a 4/4 and a green. It's a creature. It's a cat warrior, which feels random in the set, but
there's like an underground race of cat people that they discovered on Ixalan. It's like a whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the mix of vampires and dinosaurs and all these other things was
they
not
had to add
random
another
enough.
right.
I mean, yeah, okay. Well, it's a 5/4 trample with Descent 4, which is a good number, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever Malamet Veteran attacks, if there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. I like this a lot because it is an attack trigger and not an ETB trigger, so you will probably get the Descent 4 trigger at some point. With ETB, you might miss if you do this on curve, I guess, with Descent 4, and now you will definitely get it.
Yeah, and it can target itself. Or it can target something else. It doesn't have to target something that's attacking, so you can build up something else.
Yeah,
to get
I think the most likely
Yeah.
target is itself, since it has trample. It feels a good target anyway. So
yeah, I think a lot of the times with cards like this, my strategy is I want to diversify my threats in case they draw a removal spell. So I'm putting his counters on a smaller guy so that I'm giving my opponent a harder decision if they have.
Yeah, likely you'll have one at that time. Yeah, and there's probably some good targets for that. So no, I see that.
Yeah. The green-white archetype also is built around creatures having more power than their base power. So if you put one counter on this and then put a counter on something else and then make sure all of your creatures are like that. And this card's got a lot of versatility.
The extra has that too, by the way. That is relevant. Yeah.
The what? Oh, yes.
Higher power than toughness.
Yeah, that's true. Higher base power than its regular power, and then we've got the best green uncommons. So I'll start with Earthshaker Dreadmaw. Yeah. They are really running this Reddit-ass joke into the ground. It is a 6-mana 6/6 dinosaur with trample, so Colossal Dreadmaw. And when Earthshaker Dreadmaw enters the battlefield, draw a card for each other dinosaur you control. I'm not trying to go to Magical Christmas Land and say that this is going to draw you 3 cards, because if it is, you probably already won the game. But one other dinosaur, this draws a card, that feels great. And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask. Your thoughts on the general play pattern of this card?
Dreadmaw has upped his game, I think, over the years.
Yeah. Same artist too, Jesper Racing.
Yeah. Again, if it is an aggressive format, this will be less good, right? Because some of your dinos will have died or something will have happened.
Sure.
If you get into a Borg stall, this will break it. With dinos, of course. If you have 2. With 2 other dinos, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, with 2 dinos, this is insane. I think that will happen so infrequently, though, that you shouldn't factor it into your analysis of the card, personally.
I think it's likely that will happen. And
then if Axe Draw Tyrant is good, then that comes down 2 turns before this, and if it sticks around, you get this. So.
Feels like a Phyrexian Gargantua again.
Yeah, and feeling like a Phyrexian Gargantua is good, but I will say the Phyrexian Gargantua always draws you those 2 cards.
Yeah.
Unless you have 2.
No, this one, it's like 1.1, 1.2 maybe.
I think one card. Yeah, I really
0.9.
There are going to be enough. There are going to be enough times where this is just Colossal Dreadmaw without a card that I want to account for those situations. So I'm gonna be reserved in my praise for this card.
Are there random 1/3, 2/4 dinosaurs that will likely remain on the battlefield?
I don't think so. I think they really focus the dinosaurs in like 4 and up. There's only a few 2-drops.
Okay.
Yeah. So
then this goes down a little bit in evaluation. Yeah.
But I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm sometimes wrong about these. I think I tend to be right about the 6-mana beaters though.
Yeah, I think the upside on this is just very high.
Yeah, for sure. I mean the dream scenario for this, it feels like a mythic, but I mean I just don't think that even the good scenario will happen all that often. Then you've got this next one.
Explorer's Catch. This is a nice one, I think. It's 1 and a green. It's an artifact. It enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. That's surprising because it's not a creature. But whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, it gains another +1/+1 counter on Explorer's Catch. And then you can, to tap it, after tapping it, you can move a +1/+1 counter from the catch onto target creature, activate only as a sorcery. That's a slight disadvantage, but this will ensure your board remains large.
Yeah, if this was not only as a sorcery, that threat of activation would make combat really obnoxious.
Yeah, that's probably a good choice.
I mean, it's good. I compare it to like Weapons Rack from Throne of Eldraine, which was sort of the classic, I'm doing best of 1 draft in bronze right now. Why is my opponent playing this card? This sort of thing where like it's like, man, the flexibility of putting that on all your creatures does not make it worth playing. At 2 mana, with the ability to keep getting counters when your creatures die, I think this card feels pretty good. I don't love playing it on turn 2 and maybe getting run over by an aggro deck, but I do like, this really enables the deck that cares about buffed power. I'm pretty high on this card.
Yeah, and something that just comes to mind is these explore creatures, even if they don't get the +1/+1 counter, they're often very efficient if they have the +1/+1 counter in terms of power and toughness. So you can just ensure that they have it anyway, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just the fact that it starts with 2 counters, so you do get 2 power for paying 2.
Yeah.
Even if it's turn 2.
And I will say, as for the general design of the set, I think to take advantage of the fact that they included map tokens, they've put a lot of creatures with combinations of keywords that make giving them power a lot more relevant. Creatures that really take advantage of buffed power and toughness via their base kit of keywords, and this definitely makes those creatures better.
I have a question for you. Will you abrade this? If you have a braid and the other creatures are still small and you see what's going to happen.
If they have not used this yet, if all the counters are still on the Explorer's Cache, maybe. The question is, I think more often what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to wait for them to tap to try to move the counter onto the creature and then abrade it in response. Yeah. But then I guess they get to keep the counter. That's probably still better. They get to keep the counter on Explorer's Cache though, because then because it's move, not remove as a cost, and then add as when it resolves. That's a tough decision. That's one that's going to have me burn out the timer.
I think it's good enough.
You think you abrade this?
I will. There are situations where I abrade this.
Okay, I respect that.
If you go into like explore creature, and they play like this,
maybe
it's like you will see that it will have so much power even if you start removing that creature. So I will probably.
Oh, one rules interaction to prepare people for pre-release and draft. If you kill an explore creature while it's explores on the stack, they do still get to do the explore. They just don't get to obviously put the counter on the creature because it's dead. But you don't stop them from exploring by killing the exploring creature. So same as like Connive, which we had recently, just to.
I'm pretty high on this card. This seems like the enabler the +1/+1 counter deck should have always had somehow.
And we might. This kind of card is notoriously hard to evaluate, so we might both be completely wrong on this. But if we're both calling it right now, this card's good. So
we'll see. And heavy explore decks, this card is.
I think this card's just good. Yeah. And then we've got Colossadactyl, 2 and double green for a 4/5 dinosaur with reach and trample. 1 more toughness than score stats, and 2 keywords. I think it's cooking.
Yeah, this is the... Oh, does it have reach?
Yes.
People will run into this on Arena, especially the first few weeks. Are like, oh...
I am worse about it in paper, because on Arena they do give you the little domino in the corner that says... that like it has a symbol for reach on it, so I'm better about it in Arena.
Okay, I'm the other way around. I will run into this.
Oh, you don't think you run into it in paper?
No, because then I don't know. I always, you have an opponent. You chat with the opponent. You ask them, hey, do you have any reach or flying? Or technically, when you start attacking with a flyer or something.
Well, bold of you to assume that I talk to my opponent when playing.
This is weirdly statted, though. This feels like a unique card in the sense of the keywords and what it has, and it's very. This is an aggressive card, like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of lets you sit there if your opponent has a couple bats out or whatever, and not really be fearing the aggro. Same with the Colossedon or whatever, the 4/5 reach that taps to deal 2. Yeah, I think this card's good. I think this card's solid. So now we're going to move on to the limited archetypes, and what we're going to do here is just we'll take turns reading this Signpost Uncommon to you guys, and then talk about what the archetype is trying to do briefly, and give our thoughts on how likely we think the deck is to come together. Yep. So as usual, we're going to start with green-white, and you can read this Signpost Uncommon.
This is Quetzal Malamute Exemplar, so another cat that lives in the caves, for 1 and a green and a white. So again, these Signpost Uncommons are the color combinations. And it is a 3/3 legendary creature cat warrior. Legendary is probably notable here. Mm-hmm. Your opponent can't cast spells during your turn. Whenever one or more creatures that you control, each with power greater than its base power, deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So we've seen quite some cards that are probably good with this, all the explorer creatures and so on. It is weird though that it cannot activate it somehow,
Yeah, usually in modern design, they have to give the card some way to activate itself. Like they make it like 6 mana, give +1/+1 until end of turn. I like it when they don't do that because it makes you actually solve a puzzle. But
the first ability is hardly relevant as well, I think. I don't know.
It'll lead to some real blowouts when your opponent forgets about it. It's an ability that's only relevant when your opponent forgets about it, but when they do, it's going to be rough. I am personally relatively high on this card. I don't think it's very hard at all to have a creature with higher power than it's supposed to have hit. No, anything that explores and gets a counter, anything you put equipment on, like this combat trick equipment we've got on the screen now. I think this card's extraordinarily easy to activate. I think we're missing a lot of the time. What's going to happen is you're going to play like this Iron Paw Aspirant on turn 2 or an Explorer creature on turn 2. You drop this down on turn 3 and you get in with that creature and you immediately draw a card. And the creature's probably got bigger stats than your opponent's 2-drop if you're on the play. So you're gonna get that card. I think this card's excellent, obviously. And then I think this archetype is not going to be super hard to make come together.
No, this is definitely a first pickable card in any case. Just and the equipment that is next to it, the Malamute Scythe, for example. Do equipments go up because of this, you think, as well?
A little bit. I think a lot of the creatures are just good enough that they add, like, buffing themselves with a +1/+1 counter or, like, a temporary +X+O. This Malamute Scythe, I love equipment combat tricks. They're some because I hate combat tricks. I hate, like, how it feels like you're going -1 a lot of the time.
That's, like, the first thing they discovered to make equipment better. It's like these auto attacks.
Flash snap-on.
Yeah. The equip cost here is atrocious.
Well, yeah, because it's a combat trick first and an equipment later. But I think the power buff archetype as a whole, I'm excited to see it happen. I'm surprised they haven't done this before.
Yeah, if you have a Quetzal, if that's the way to pronounce it, I'm just
Quetzal, I think.
Yeah. You will probably, play a side over a random, or one of your worst removal spells. Probably this that makes the cut. Over.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Scythe makes the cut a lot of the time anyway, but I think...
Plus 2/2 is quite a bit, but okay, you convinced me a little bit. I still think the wording on this card is weird, because it has I don't know. We've seen higher end of this Signpost Uncommons that do activate themselves.
Ultimately, I think this is going to play similarly to the Modified from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Where you it's gonna really be along those lines a lot of the time, except I think it's easier to reach because just a temporary buff will do it too.
Yeah, and please make sure at your LGS that you read out the first part of the rule text really carefully for your opponent, so they can't forget about this, because that will make it be a feel bad, like a blowout, as you said. But it's also a feel bad if they.
I would rather win than my opponent not feel bad. I will read it when I cast it. I will not remind them.
No, that's fair, but read it carefully when you cast it in the first.
I will read it if they ask me to read it.
Sure, yeah.
What you should do if you don't know what your opponent's cards do, and that is your responsibility. White, blue, craft, and artifacts. This Signpost Uncommon is one Patrick really is excited about, so unfortunately I will get to read it. But we've got Master's Guide Mural, the only Signpost Uncommon that's not a legendary creature. It's instead an artifact, not legendary. 3 a white and a blue. When Master's Guide Mural enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 Golem artifact creature token. That Golem is white and blue. And you can craft this, not the golem, you can craft this with an artifact for 4 double white and blue, so 7 mana. Better be good on the backside, and it is. Master's Manufactory, artifact, tap, create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token, like the one that the front makes. Activate only if this or another artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So an ability to maybe pump out golems if you can consistently like make gnomes or treasures or maps or something. I think this card is sneakily quite good. I mean, looking at it just as a 5 mana 4/4 is solid, and then the ability to make more later potentially.
If you get there, this is a game winner, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Even just making a second golem if you don't have any other ways to make artifacts.
If you have enough, not if you're empty-handed, right? But if you get enough card advantage still going, that you get these artifact triggers going, I don't see there's a way for your opponent to get out of this.
Yeah, it definitely feels like...
Okay.
But at 7 mana, that's a big ask. I'm curious to see where this card goes. I'm not going to call it good. I will say that this archetype seems like maybe you just make a good mid-range deck that cares about this a little bit.
I hope you can make a control deck that can make this work. That will be a good sign for the format. But
all right.
There is some, not necessarily what we have shown today, but there is some blue removal as well that gives you quite some time.
Yeah.
Some efficient bounce spells that and with the map tokens you can get your creatures high enough to buy you this time.
I think possibly, yeah.
Well, even some life gain here and there. I mean, it's I don't know. I'm dreaming now.
We'll see. I mean, I'm skeptical, but I do like limited formats which have a viable hard control deck. It doesn't feel like we get those very much anymore because casual players don't really enjoy counter spells or removal spells as much as people who kind of understand the game as a back and forth. But
it is, you get a 4/4 for 5 with nothing else, but that is an artifact, and you get to keep the mural, which is an artifact. So you might even craft something else using this artifact.
That's true, I hadn't thought of that. I would feel kind of bad about doing that, especially if my deck is reasonably capable of making maps or treasures, but yeah, I mean, that's also a possibility to consider. I think that's true of a lot of these artifacts that like have most of their value on the front side, not attached to the actual card. Yeah. So that's blue-white, or white-blue craft and artifacts. This is definitely, I feel like, the hardest to evaluate archetype. But next we're moving into blue-black descend. Enjoy pronouncing that.
Yeah, Uchbenbach, I was saying.
But I'm German.
I'm too German here, I think.
Yeah.
Uchbenbach?
I think it's Uchbenbach.
Bach. Yeah.
I think, because there's no in Spanish.
We made a great mistake. And It's called the Great Mistake for 3 blue and a black. It's a legendary creature, Skeleton Horror. Amazing art, by the way.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's Stephen Belladin.
And it's a 6/4 Vigilance Menace, but it has Descent 8. For 4, a blue and a black again. Return Uchbenbach. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to keep it like this. I'm going to make it a thing.
Return Orville Redenbacher.
I'm going to make it a thing. The Great Mistake from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard and only as a sorcery.
Yeah, so a finality counter, I didn't put it in the new mechanics because this is going to be a new evergreen thing, and I expect them only to put it on 2 or 3 cards in a set. But basically it's just, if it would die, it's exiled instead. So text we've seen on a card before, but they're making it a counter. Hopefully so that once people kind of get used to seeing it as a counter, they won't have to spell it out anymore. They can just put finality counter. Although that's not the case in this set, of course.
It has an interesting thing that you can remove the counter from it somehow.
Yeah, there's only a few ways to do that, but it's not. Yeah, it's sort of getting in the weeds. I think
for Commander that might be
fun, but we don't talk about Commander on this channel. Thank you. So this is a. The stats are good on this.
I will keep trying.
The stats are good on this. 5 mana, 6/4 Vigilance Menace. I love 2 keywords on basically square stats. And this ability to bring it back is just really not all that unrealistic. It counts as one of the 8 too. So
I mean, these are better keywords than Reach and Trample, for example.
Broadly speaking, I think that's true. Yeah, these keywords work together better than Vigilance and Trample do. Yeah, I think this card's good. I don't have much else to say about it. It's not going to be that hard to get Descend, especially with some cards that mill yourself, which we've got some here, right? And then you can put other cards that care about Descend, like that Didact Echo we both love, or that 3/2 Sage of Ages or whatever.
Yeah, and now we have the marionette on the screen, and that's a lovely art as well, by the way.
Yeah, Svetlin Velinov.
But, if this is blue-black a thing and you want to have as many permanents in your graveyard as quickly as possible, this is a good common as well.
Yeah. 2 mana, 1/1 Death Touch. You can mill 2 cards when it comes in.
And it's May, so...
Yeah, if for some reason you're low on cards and you just want to drop the Death Toucher, you're welcome to, I
prefer it to be May, though.
I feel like that May is on there for casual players who don't understand that milling yourself is good. Because that is a common problem I found, because I've taught a lot of people how to play this game. And the 2 biggest things are like, why would I want cards to go in my graveyard?
Yeah.
And... life total is really important. Why would I pay life for things? Those are sort of the 2 biggest misconceptions among new players. So I'm curious if that's part of the reason why the May... Because there's several cards that read like this, where they have a May mill. And I'm curious if that's why.
I think it improves the common a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
If you start with this signpost and common early in the draft and something other really high-end in blue or black that you also maybe want to have in the graveyard. There's probably... I remember there's 1 or 2 examples of other rares that have like the similar thing. I would therefore play more marionettes.
Yeah, I think you will always say yes to the mill unless it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So my curiosity is why it's a May at all. The only reason I can really think of is a newer player being put off by having to mill cards. But I don't know. So yeah, this is kind of blue-black Descend. It cares about the number of permanents in your graveyard and gives you a lot of ways to make that happen. So I think this deck will not be too hard to put together, especially because a lot of the cards are just good enough by themselves. Even if you can't bring Uchbenbach back, it's a fine rate. So next we'll talk about black-red, the other kind of Descend this turn. And we've got Zoyoa Lava Tongue, a black and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warlock, legendary, right? Death Touch. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, each opponent may discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. This deals 3 damage to each opponent who didn't. So, sort of like those Hour of Devastation cards that, like Torment of Hailfire, Torment of Scarabs, those ones that give your opponent this sort of unappetizing choice between losing some life or sacking a permanent, although it's notable on this one, it does let them sacrifice a land, so it is a little different than those cards. But this card coming down on turn 2, and then you being able to sort of consistently descend after that will really put a ton of pressure on your opponent. I think if there's an aggro deck in this format that works, black-red is going to be where it finds its home. What are your thoughts, Patrick?
I'm looking forward to making this work. This is a cool card.
Yeah, it's sweet.
It is still a card in the category your opponent has some decision making here. And assuming they will always make the right decision for them, this will not always be.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, if you're playing against a perfect Magic player, and that is how you should evaluate these choice cards, right? Because giving your opponent that choice is always bad.
Yeah.
But the card, that just means that the card has a hill to climb in terms of being good, and I think this card might climb it. Like even whatever the worst of these options is, or whatever the least backbreaking of these options is for your opponent, if they pick that every time, you're still going to feel pretty good about it, because a 2-mana 2/2 Death Touch is great.
There's probably this card on turn 2 will be amazing, I think.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
If you can keep it going afterwards, as you said. There will be, however, some archetypes where this will feel a bit flat. Where they have a lot of tokens to sacrifice the first few turns.
Sure. I will say there's a 3-mana 2/2 flyer in black that mills a card whenever it attacks.
Yeah.
So you can play that on turn 3, and then you just have this live every turn pretty much. Which is pretty relevant. I want to point out also Seismic Monstrosaur. There's a cycle of basic land cyclers in this set, like they have often done recently to kind of smooth out mana. And this one is particularly relevant because it lets you pay 3 and sack a land to draw a card while it's out. So having this out, it just guarantees descend every turn. So, you have things like this Brood Rage Mycoid, which is also on the screen. Lots of cards that care about whether you descended this turn that can just be guaranteed turned on.
Yeah, and again, descend doesn't count tokens, right?
Correct, it's super unintuitive because any sort of Aristocrats deck that cares about creatures dying cares about tokens. But this one, it says card, which makes it not work with tokens.
Yeah. They changed something in design there along the way. Probably already over a year ago, but I don't know. They made a mess of it a little bit, I think.
Very strange.
It doesn't count for tokens. That's the main thing. But there is enough going on, I think.
I think this deck will be the only aggro deck in the format. I mean, it looks like a competent mid-range deck too, but I think this will be the
especially
aggro deck.
Especially because Boros, and we haven't seen that yet, but Boros is not an aggro deck this time.
Right, Boros is an interesting deck. That's the one I'm really excited to talk about. So we've got our last ally color pair with red-green dinosaur tribal. You get all the tough names.
Yeah, it's Quint, firstborn of Gishat.
Yeah, so now we canonically know that Gishath has fucked, which is very important information for the Magic playing public.
Yeah, this is, by the way, and we're going to get into it, but this is a dinosaur I've been looking for this deck, I think.
You think so?
Because this is a red and a green, and it's a 2/3 dinosaur, legendary creature, by the way. Again, that might be notable. And so it has haste. But when it ETBs, you may pay 2. When you do, target dinosaur you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature.
Yeah, so this is really more a 4-drop, I think, unless you're really trying to play an aggro deck. I think this is great as a 4-drop, looking at it as a sort of like Flame Tongue Kavu.
I mean, if you have the Gargantua impersonator in your hand, and you know you have a curve of dinosaurs, which is not unlikely that you have 3 in your opening hand for this deck.
Sure.
Well, yeah, it's better as a 4-drop.
Yeah, and if your opponent just wants to hand you a pile of cash too, that'd be cool. Yeah, just like a couple hundreds.
No, I think the format looks like it will be a 4-drop.
Yeah, that's my thought on this, because I just don't think
it's probably already better anyway, but that probably is what it turns out to, especially if you have have the chance to play a 3 or 4-drop before that has higher power than this guy.
Right. I mean, looking at the 2-drop 3/2 that we saw earlier in red or something similar. Yeah. Dinosaurs is really lacking in 3-drops specifically. It doesn't have, I think, any common 2-drops either, but it's definitely lacking in 3-drops as well. You're seeing most of the dinosaurs in the 4 and up.
Isn't there because we have an example of this here as well with the bristleback. Isn't there an example of a spell that makes a dinosaur that you could play before turn 4?
Maybe. I'm not sure what you're referencing exactly.
No, I don't know if there is, but
I don't think there is.
I mean, the ideal play, as we agreed upon, is have a 3-power dinosaur out before you play this on turn 4, probably. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, both of these that you see here are fine as well. I think I like this as stats on the Forest Cycler as well.
I mean, this card's fine. It's 8/8 split between 2 bodies for 7 mana, and it's got the Forest Cycler.
I always like creatures that, ETB or give another creature flying or menace, that tends to work well.
I really like the art on this card too. It reminds me of going to a museum and seeing one of the models of a dinosaur at like the Natural History Museum or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so that's red-green dinosaurs. We're moving into the enemy color pairs, starting with a certified hood classic, white-black Sacrifice, Bartolomé del Presidio. Is 2/1 for white and a black. Legendary creature, Vampire Knight. Sacrifice another creature or artifact. Put a +1/+1 counter on Bartolomé del Presidio.
This will be very good.
Really?
This will be very good.
That's crazy, bro.
No, these are always very good.
This card's great.
But it is, it's not. I don't feel like it's not an entry level deck you build as a new player in draft, but it is always very good.
Yeah, I think the ability to sack artifacts is going to be pretty relevant here, although I will say the most sackable artifacts, the treasures, are really only being made by red. Yeah. But if you are playing some of these cards in a black-red deck or whatever, then they add that utility. There's map tokens too, which I mean I would always rather crack themselves than sack here. But
the maps you use yourself just because of the potential card filtering.
Yeah, but I think the very relevant thing about Bartolomé is that he is an instant speed 0 mana sack outlet. So any removal your opponent tries to use, he's going to get a little bit of value out of unless they kill him first.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, so that the sort of Mother of Runes problem where they have to target him first or they're getting less out of their removal.
Yeah, and we see the other cards here that fit the archetype. I like those too. Like the Acolyte will be a finisher even. I think.
Yeah. I mean,
that'll drain people out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it compares very unfavorably to say like Vermin Gorger from Modern Horizons 2.
Okay. Yeah.
But this is also not a Horizons set. I do think the power gulf between those two cards is enough that I'm a little hesitant to be excited about this card, but it holds off aggro well, and I mean, you're not going to be attacking with it, so being able to tap to sacrifice something that your opponent targets with removal to drain him for 1 is a very nice option.
Yeah. I mean, if you start with any of these cards early in the draft, go for a lot of token makers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this will work out perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't see, except for the map tokens, that they have done anything originally here. This is like This is what you usually
and Mark Rosewater has said before that when they design formats, I think he said they like to have 4 draft archetypes that are a thing their colors normally do, 4 that are like a twist on what their colors normally do, and then 2 that are way out there. Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about one of the way out there's already, and we're going to get into another one. But yeah, Black-White Sacrifice is definitely, if you've drafted another set, it's pretty likely that you've played with a White-Black Sacrifice theme. So.
And let's not forget the common that makes the 1/1 gnome, the 3/2 flyer for 4.
Yeah, that feels pretty great. Yeah, those gnomes are not doing much, so you put them on Bartolomé. And then the other thing...
It's good with all of these cards.
Yeah, just another thing about Bartolomé, it's fun to say his name, in case you can tell. The threat of activation on attacking with him, where like you have a bunch of creatures out, their blocks feel a lot worse because you could pump them up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's White-Black Sacrifice. Moving next in, we've got Black-Green Descend/Graveyard. You've noticed, like, all of the color combinations, half the color combinations that involve black, like, you know, maybe we could see a Jund or a Sultai deck that cares about all these and kind of goes into the late game. You've got this card to read, right?
Akawali the Seething Tower. Legendary creature fungus for 1 and a black and a green. A 3/3, so normally stated at first, you would say. Mm-hmm. But it has Descent 4 and Descent 8. At Descent 4, as long as there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, Akawali gets +2/+2 and has Trample. At Descent 8, so even later in the game, 8 is pushing it a bit, I feel like.
Yeah, 8 is not going to... I think you're going to get to Descent 8 at some point in probably 80% of games, whereas I think you're... Maybe 70% of games, whereas I think Descent 4 you're going to get to in 100% of games.
Yeah, I mean...
Eventually.
We'll have some another mill card here to discuss.
Right.
And I think that one is pretty good, but if that one ends up being good, you will more likely get there, because lands counts as well.
For sure.
But at Descent 8, as long as there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, Akawali gets an additional +2/+2 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature.
Yeah, so the ceiling on this is a 7/7 for 3 with Trample and Anti-Menace. That's not going to happen that often, or when it does.
Win you the game.
Well, when it does happen, you're playing this on turn 6 or something, and that's a fine 6-drop. So but yeah, I mean, I think this card's pretty great. It doesn't have any way to turn itself on, but
did you notice that they only spelled his name in full at Descent 4 and not at Descent 8?
Yeah, I wonder if they literally just couldn't do it for the templating. Probably in some other language in German, where he's Akawali Der Seething Turbans or some shit, but it doesn't fit there.
I want to talk about another chance though, because that seems like they've pushed that kind of card a little bit more even.
Yeah, and I would compare it to the card Unseal the Necropolis from March of the Machine, where it mills your opponent 2, and in that format you care about that, or mills your opponent as well, and it mills 3. So I do think that one's a little better than this, but...
Yeah, but I feel like they're trying iterations of those cards to improve them.
Yeah.
And I feel like this at 3 mana, return up to 2 creature cards.
Yeah, I have sort of a bias when I'm playing Limited that I really hate to have a deck that can't gain life with any of its cards, and I really hate to have a deck that can't get anything back with any of its cards. So I'm always a little higher on the Raise Dead variants of any given format, just because I really don't like to feel like I'm backed into a corner, and like if I want to have access to a particular thing, that there's no top deck that'll give it to me. So I really like to have these Raise Dead effects, so I'm not complaining when they're better. I'm looking at the best ones, things like Blood Fountain. Like in recent years, the best ones have been things like Blood Fountain, that Unseal the Necropolis we talked about.
Which turned out to be an amazing common.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is like up there with those. I wouldn't say it's nearly as good as Blood Fountain or Unseal the Necropolis, but it's quite good for sure.
It feels very close.
Yeah.
And we have capybaras in Magic now. That's all I want to say about that one.
That's sweet. Another tribe for a few people to bother Mark Rosewater about on his blog to get a tribal commander, and he has to patiently explain that just because they gave it a creature type doesn't mean that they're gonna give it tribal support.
This should have been a dinosaur.
So the dinosaurs could have a competent 2-drop?
Yeah, that would have worked.
I think the whole point of the weakness of dinosaurs is that they're not supposed to. That's probably
true. But I'm just going to play that out of fun.
Yeah. Competent common 2-drop. Yeah. The Basking Capybara is great. It's kind of Tarmogoyf-esque. And next we've got Green-Blue Explorer. This is a really powerful signpost uncommon. We've got Nikansil, Current Conductor, who was the former Conductor. It's green and a blue for a 2/3 legendary Merfolk Scout. Whenever a creature you control explores a land card, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on Nikan Seal, current conductor. So take a shot every time a Simic commander can let you play extra lands. But it is pretty strong. Just whenever you, I think you're gonna feel kind of bad about the land half of this, but the second part, the counter on this guy every time you explore, pretty good. And a 2-minute 2/3 is nothing to sneeze at.
This is the Explorer Lord, right?
Yeah,
and They had. I remember they had cards like this in previous Ixalan as well.
Right,
that benefited from multiple explorations, and this is the one. And this will just get big. It will just get big.
Yeah,
I mean, you will get the land, so it does get you quicker to the other cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a form of actual deck filtering.
Yeah,
that's what keeps this card at a high level.
I think so for sure.
I'm not too high on it. I don't know.
No, I mean I don't think it's the best signpost in common, but I really think all the signposts in commons pretty much have been good. So you're kind of comparing this to other very good cards.
I think, we also come out of Wilds of Eldraine, where there were a few of them were very amazing.
Like, Greta comes to mind.
The blue one.
Shure was silly. Yeah.
And this feels like some of them feel like a bit lower now. And I depending if the format is really slow, this will work out. This Explorer deck, I think. Otherwise, I don't feel too happy about it. Even though these two cards next to it are quite.
I think it's kind of just that the stats are there. Like even if you're not triggering it, a 2-minute 2/3 feels fine. So I'm high on it. And then these are just two fairly statted creatures that explore when they come in that I've kind of put next to it to sort of...
Those were very good, the last iteration of Ixalan.
Yeah,
these creatures...
And I don't think anything has changed here.
No, they will be very good.
They're a little worse in a less aggressive format, but they're very solid.
Yeah, I think Wizards had to check if they were not interfering with any medicine name. Nikanzo sounds like medication.
Oh! Yeah. All right.
Some company getting angry at Wizards now for
Rogaine Cosmium later. All right, so you're reading this one, right?
We're in blue-red artifacts pirates.
This is the shittiest one. I gotta be real.
Yeah,
this one's not coming together.
We agree to it immediately, and we think it's a shame because we like pirates a little bit. I think I liked it the last time. Yeah. Anyway, we have a bit of a lame name as well in Captain Storm.
That's Lannery Storm. She's much worse now.
But she was a captain already before, but now she's just... Okay, yeah. I don't know. Captain Storm Cosmian Raider, blue and a red, legendary creature, human pirate. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control.
Yeah, she's a 2/2. So obviously she can target herself. Feels pretty good to put the diamond pickaxe on her.
Yeah.
Because, she's a 3/3 and then immediately a 4/4. All right, I mean, this isn't once per turn, so like the play pattern of her on turn 2, turn 3, you play the thing and equip it, she's immediately a 4/4, hit them, get a treasure, she's a 5/5.
Yep.
I guess this pirate's hat actually works as well, although it doesn't give you a treasure when you attack, so it's, going to be a little worse. But the pirate hat is an example of a card that's like just quite bad if you don't have the...
Yeah, I feel like now they just moved the problem from Boros to Izzet. With being the equipment.
Yeah, and Izzet was, I think, probably the worst color combination in the last set, too.
Yeah.
So,
blue is either the best color in the format or the worst color, and they cannot seem to tune it any other way.
Well, I mean, I think blue was fine in the last set. It was specifically blue-red that was just not good enough for me, because blue-white was great.
I had troubles with
blue-black was also solid.
Yeah. You need to have a lot of treasure making as well.
I mean, don't let us shitting on this dissuade you from experimenting with it in a draft, but this definitely feels like it is not... Like, if you're building this deck, you're not leaning on the things that it's telling you to lean on. You're just building a mid-range deck that uses good red and blue cards, because red has good removal. I mean, whatever.
It feels like you will have to attempt all this synergy in your deck with treasures and maps
and pirates. And here's the thing,
and then your creatures are just as big as the dinosaurs.
Right, and here's the thing. If the good common and uncommon creatures in blue and red happened to be pirates, we'd be singing a different tune. But when you're looking at the good 2-drops like the River Herald, Merfolk Scout, looking at the good red 2-drops, they're dinosaurs or they're orcs or whatever, like or ogres, whatever. You're just not. not enough of the creatures that you just want to play in a blue-red deck happen to be pirates compared to the dinosaur deck where your top-end creatures that you want already are dinosaurs, right? You've got the 6-mana 7/7, which happens to be a dinosaur. And that is not the case here, so I'm very skeptical about the ability of the blue-red deck to succeed, personally.
And do we have a guest appearance of a Ragavan in the back there, or what's going on there?
No, that's not Malcolm, the other one. Breaches.
Breaches.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. I know my monkey goblin lore. Ragavan's actually native to Kaladesh.
That's true.
So
that's true.
Yeah, you're not going to be invited back. All right. Red white go wide / artifacts. This is a weird one. I'll go ahead and read the signposted comment first before I explain what the archetype's all about because I feel like it illustrates it well. Kaparokti Sunborn, 2 a red and a white for a 4/4 legendary human soldier. So 4 mana 4/4. When it attacks, you may tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, discover 3. So I think that's kind of a crazy attack trigger. You run the risk of this getting removed before it gets to do something, but broadly, what this archetype is about is tapping creatures and artifacts to get a bonus effect. And I think what makes this especially promising, because these cards are hard to evaluate. We really haven't seen a deck that's trying to do a similar thing before. But I think where you're really going to get a lot of the power in this deck is these craft cards that care more about what they're doing on the front side than on the back side, leaving those around. Because if you have 2 of those sitting around or 1 of those in a treasure, then you're not having to actually commit any of your stats on the board to getting this Kaparokti happening, right? It's just going to be happening. Same with the Adaptive Gem Guard we've got here, which can put counters on itself as a sorcery by tapping artifact or creatures. This thing can get out of hand incredibly quickly if you just have treasures, maps, and the front faces of crafts sitting around to keep pumping it. You're going to break parity with this card and be winning on board.
Yeah, and the idol on the right is a good example of the kind of artifact you want to have lying around to just tap.
Yeah, that's why I put that there. Yeah. Same with the white one that deals 4.
I have not seen any creatures that are good to use with it, like no vigilance creatures or anything.
Right.
I mean, they've probably stayed away from that, even on the equipment, just to not have that going.
Yeah. Speaking of equipment, those are great in this deck because you can tap them and they don't care that they're tapped.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they've done some things to make equipment,
Yeah, I think that this deck is going to be really interesting. I'm going to be kind of bummed if it doesn't work out. I was similarly very excited for the bargain deck.
Yeah.
In the last format, or sorry, the blue-white tap-down deck I was super excited about, and that didn't quite pan out because it felt like the good blue-white decks were just mid-range decks in the last format. But I'm very excited to see how this deck pans out, and I hope it'll be as interesting as it looks like it'll play.
Yeah, I think this is, going back to Strixhaven, where they first tried to do something different with Boros.
Yeah.
And went into this
and it was a little bit awkward in that set, as I remember. It didn't pan out quite as good, but it was cool.
But this looks cool as well.
Yeah, this is definitely novel. That would be the word I'd use.
But I think
to describe
this cover is very good, so I'm very high on this.
On the signpost in particular, it's unfortunate that it has to attack and that it's not just at the beginning of combat on your turn or something. So you are gonna, in a format full of big creatures, you are often gonna either not be able to swing with this, or you're gonna have to trade it after 1 attack. In which case you feel fine because you've essentially got that Bloodbraid Elf value going.
Yeah, but I am high on all these 3 cards, I think. So for example, I see this happening.
I hope this deck comes together easily. I definitely like it. I try to avoid being biased toward decks that I'm just really excited to see work. I don't want to say that it's going to work because I want it to, but I think it's really sweet at the very least.
Yeah, well, this is something you can try on Arena and get burned really hard, or just
Whereas in paper, just. We'll head to the LGS and go 2-1 and feel bad about it, I guess.
No, this will be fun to play.
Yeah, I think it's solid. I think it'll be cool. So now we're going to go on to best bombs, the most brain dead part of the presentation. Longtime fans, aka my friends and relatives, will know that these are meant to help you with your sort of meat and potatoes limited gameplay. Beyond Meat and Potatoes limited gameplay, where it's just, the commons and uncommons are going to matter more for your analysis because you're going to see more of those. But we do still like to talk about the most relevant bombs so that you can be aware of them, know that they should probably guide you if you pack one, pick one them, if you're able to, and know what to kind of play against, or at least preemptively be ready to complain about on Reddit. Trumpeting Carnosaur is the first one, and we don't need to Do we need to read all these, do you think, or just kind of...
No, we can go over some of them.
Okay, so we'll take turns reading them. You want to start with this one?
Yeah, Trumpeting Carnosaur, 4 into red, 7/6 trample. When it enters the battlefield, discover 5. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, there's more text on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 and a red, discard Trumpeting Carnosaur. It deals 3 damage, so it's 2 target creature or planeswalker. So it's a removal spell if you have it in your opening hand.
Yeah, I mean it's a 3-mana lightning strike.
Yeah.
That also
I feel like
makes you descend on that turn because you put a permanent spell in your graveyard.
I feel like you have to be a bit desperate though, because
Hey, if I'm aggressive enough and I've got the Newt or whatever out, or Goblin, the legendary, the signpost uncommon, and I do this on turn 3, remove their blocker, hit them, I've descended, get the trigger. Yeah. I'm not going to feel too mad about that. But yes, obviously this is going to feel pretty similar to a Tali from March of the Machine when you're actually casting it, and that is, let me tell you, that's a good place to be.
This was Tali in a previous design.
Yeah.
I did a bit for it.
Yeah, I bet. So this card is going to feel a little backbreaking, plus the sort of versatility that feels just completely unnecessary to put on the card, frankly.
We can continue on to the next one.
Next we've got Sentinel, the Nameless City. Now this is going to my cube, for sure. This card's really exciting to me personally. It's 2 and a green, for a 3/4 Merfolk Warrior Scout.
Yep.
With Vigilance. Whenever Sentinel of the Nameless City enters the battlefield or attacks, create a map token. So people have, in discussion, definitely been describing this as like half of a Titan. And I agree, right? It's, the stat line is roughly half of Titan. It's got that extra toughness, right? And then the attack, enters the battlefield or attack, guarantees you're getting at least 1 map token off of it, even if it gets removed. And if it doesn't, you can maybe be using the map tokens to pump this to make sure your opponent's not going to be able to trade with this profitably or favorably. So I think this just pushes into bomb territory off of that play pattern.
We had a Sentinel in... or that was called a Sentinel as well in Wilds of Eldraine, I think. There was also a 3/4 for 3.
Yes. So when it came in, you could choose one or more.
Return an
adventure. Put one of your exiled adventures back in your hand, or tuck one of theirs, or exile their graveyard.
Yeah, this feels a bit better.
Card is solid. This card's definitely better. Yeah.
And that is a good, good comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, this card's very good. I think it's
multiple artifacts making.
You're going to feel great.
Multiple explore as well,
Yeah, just pretty easy to get it up to 1 more power for that deck that cares about that. Just every deck that wants it.
The blue-green signpost uncommon gets really big with this one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I think even just looking at this card by itself, like, you're going to be excited about this in the dinosaur deck.
Yeah. Sure.
You're going to want it in whatever deck you can get it in.
Yeah.
Speaking of wanting it in whatever deck can get it in, luckily this is 2 colors because it's pretty cracked.
Yeah, it's Anim Pakal, the Thousand Moon actually. Legendary creature, human soldier for 1 a red and a white. It's a 1/2. Whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnome creatures, that's the first time we ever had to read that. Put a +1/+1 counter on Anim Pakal, then create X 1/1 colors gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim Pakal. So basically, when this gets bigger, you get an extra army of gnomes that attack with it.
Yeah, the gnomes are kind of insane here. Like, the ability to... So I would compare this favorably to the Krenko from War of the Spark. That's kind of what we were talking about before we recorded. I think because this doesn't have to attack. You can attack with... I mean, even just, this is not an unreasonable scenario. You play your 2-drop on turn 2. You play this on turn 3. You swing with the 2-drop, and you just put a counter on this and get 2 gnomes. And at that point, you've paid 3 mana for a 2/3 and 2 1/1s. Yeah, and if they don't answer it next turn, you got a 3/4 and 3 more 1/1s.
And on top of that, you then have 2 random artifacts that showed up that you can use for tapping and all your synergy stuff that you have in the board.
Yeah, this card, if you've ever played with that Krenko, this is great. This is really good.
Yeah, no, this will be...
Yeah, the tapped and attacking can kind of be a downside if the board state's gummed up, because your opponent can just eat them, but... I mean, if this doesn't have to attack, you're eventually going to make more gnomes than they can eat in 1 turn.
If you had a few attacks before that will not happen. So,
right. Yeah. So, I think this card's great. We've got another page of rares and then the 3 mythics. So, next we've got Kutsil's Flanker. 2 and a white for a 3/1 Cat Warrior with Flash. When Kutsil's Flanker enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. You gain 2 life and scry 2, or exile target player's graveyard. I think this is kind of an insane removal spell, just for the value that it has, like coming in and exiling stuff, or a particularly bloody combat happens, and then you put this in, and maybe it is a 5/3 or a 6/4 even for 3. I think this card's great. I think it's just got a ton of versatility on it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great, and they've recently been printing these white flash creatures that are basically removal spells, and this becomes one because it has 3 power, so it will trade with something.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it might even survive, or do something, if creatures were already... Maybe you're sacking stuff, right?
And I don't think this format is particularly bomby, which is why a card of this quality is like pushing into the bomb.
Yeah, this can be a blowout
territory, but I think this card's fine. Yeah.
The other 2 modes are like, if the gaining life and scrying...
That feels fine.
It's fine but you probably do that on curve or something, right? And you do just end of the third turn of your opponent.
Make sure you draw gas next turn and gain 2 life.
Yeah, I don't. Great. The graveyard. I mean,
or as a blocker.
Yeah, if you trade your 3/1 in combat with a good creature they have.
Yeah.
And you exile their graveyard,
shutting off their
descent or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really relevant.
Yeah. I think the next one is pushing it a bit.
Yeah, well, this one's yours.
It's Preacher of the... How do we say it? Schism. Okay. Learned something today. 2 in the black. Creature, Vampire Cleric. 2/4 with Death Touch. That tends to be good stats because it's hard to kill.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It kills other things, basically. But whenever it attacks, the player with the most life or tied for the most life, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Basically, it will bring you back from being behind on life.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever it attacks while you have the most life or are tied for the most life, so they can both trigger at the same time as well.
Yeah, if you're tied.
Yeah, you draw a card and you lose 1 life.
Yeah,
this is advantage all over the place.
Yeah, this card's incredibly wordy. I think it's one of those victims of like needing to add another paragraph worth of text to make it work in Commander.
Yeah.
But for those of you who only play real Magic, when this attacks, if they have the most life, you get the token. If you have the most life, you draw a card and lose a life. If you're tied, you get both.
It's never bad.
Yeah, it's never bad.
Yeah.
Always good. This coming down on turn 3 and them not having a removal spell is going to feel absolutely backbreaking no matter which mode you're getting to do.
They need to have a big dinosaur to stop this thing.
Basically, yeah. And they have to trade it, and you're still getting something out of it. So I think that's the definition of a bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, just putting your opponent in a no-win scenario. And then this next one's very interesting, coming off of the back of a format where something threefold is definitely giving us a little bit of PTSD. Threefold Thunderhawk is a 7-mana 0/0 artifact creature gnome, but it enters with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever Threefold Thunderhawk enters the battlefield or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnomes equal to its power. Pay 2, pay 2, sacrifice another artifact. Put a +1/+1 counter on Threefold Thunderhawk. Yeah. So you can sack those gnomes to get even more gnomes every time it attacks.
Yeah.
I think this card is very
maps,
good.
Treasures, other things.
Oh, yeah, treasures for sure. I think I'd rather just crack the map on it personally, but yeah, you can sack treasures to this to make it bigger, and then you get even more gnomes when it attacks. Yeah, I think this card's good. 7 mana is a bit of an ask, but...
feels like Mere Battlesphere to me somehow.
Kinda, yeah. I definitely don't think it's as good as Mere Battlesphere, but it's definitely like a sort of a more fair version.
It's a slower version.
Sure.
But it will, I mean, if they don't get rid of this, you will swarm the board.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
That is...
Yeah, moving on to the Mythic Bombs, which are just, a lot more simple to evaluate how good they are. You're reading this one.
It's a pretty simple evaluation. It's Contorious Cant. I think
it's Canned.
Canned. Well, he can do some stuff, actually.
Yeah, he can.
He's 3, a red and a white. He's a legendary planeswalker. Quintorius. First time we've seen him as a planeswalker, I believe.
Yes.
He starts with Loyalty 4. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, Quintorius Count deals 2 damage to each opponent. You gain 2 life. That is a bit of a... That text is a bit weird and limited.
Yeah, I think lately... So first of all, I think lately they've kind of been making the Planeswalker more good constructed since they're only doing 1% and not really caring about limited. And the big thing that it does key off of in this set, though, is Discover. Because the cards are exiled before you cast them.
That's... Okay.
So,
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, but the basic evaluation for Planeswalkers back in the day was always if they can protect themselves, they are good Planeswalkers. But this one, plus it's 1.
Yeah, normally you're minusing to make the creature that can block,
and
but
it makes a blocker.
Yeah.
3 through white's spirit token, red and white spirit token. And then for -3, it does discover 4, where 4 is pretty high.
Which will trigger its first ability if you cast the spell. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And then exile any number of target cards from your graveyard for -6. Add red mana for each card exiled this way. You may play those cards this turn.
I don't really see you doing anything other than just plussing this over and over again, because the Discover 4 is rarely going to give you something better than a 3/2.
Yeah.
And it's going to drain your opponent for 2, so if you're ready to win. But I think you just plus this over and over, unless your opponent has it under direct threat and you're ready to minus it. I think this card's great. Just pooping out a 3/2 every turn for 5 mana is insane.
Card.
Yeah.
Is the
a lot better than Ashiok in the last set. Like Ashiok was not even that good in limited.
I'm trying to reevaluate the -6 here. It will probably give you 2 cards back.
Yeah, I mean, it's an alt. I think you ignore it in favor of the +1. Like, this Planeswalker would be good if it just had the +1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next, we've got the Skullspore Nexus. This was actually one of the first cards revealed, and it really has the Great Henge vibes, where, it's a commander card that is incredibly powerful and limited as well. 6 and double green. Costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, so that maybe that's where those vibes are coming from, right? Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness each equal to the total power of those creatures. So for however many creatures died, you get a token that's a combination of them, right? And then 2 and tap, double target creature's power until end of turn. Yeah, didn't need that last line of text, but you go to trade a creature, you want an even bigger fungus dinosaur when it dies? Great. 2 and tap, double it. They don't block it, 2 and tap, double it, fucking kill them.
Yeah, if you have a greedy combat incoming, this is a 20/20 next turn.
Yeah, this card's stupid.
With the dinosaur deck, this can cost 2 to 4.
With the Merfolk deck, this can cost 2 mana.
This will cost 2 to 4 to play.
Yeah. Getting a 6-power creature in this format is not a big ask.
No.
And you want to play it where you can activate it in the same turn.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be difficult at all. And then last we've got one of my favorite cards in the set, one I'm very excited about. So Patrick, do you want to read this for us?
Yeah, it's Aklazot's Deepest Betrayal. It's 3 and 2 black. It's a legendary creature, Bat God, 4/4 flying lifelink. So lots of text already there. But there's 3 more abilities incoming. Whenever Aklazot attacks, so this is a mouth breaker, as they say. Each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. So this was an attack trigger. And then whenever an opponent discards a land card, you create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. When Aklazot dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control.
And on the back side, it's Temple of the Dead. It's a land that taps for a black, and you can pay 2 and a black, tap, transform Temple of the Dead. Activate only if a player that you or your opponent has 1 or fewer cards in their hand, and only as a sorcery.
So you flip it back immediately the turn after.
If either player is heckbent, someone's going to be.
Yeah,
so,
with this card itself, if you get an attack in turn 5, you get an attack in, people will likely be, or you.
Yeah, I'm beginning to feel like a bat god. I think this card's great. If they don't exile it, it's just coming back, and it's just gonna. What beats a 4/4 flying lifelink in 99% of limited games?
No.
Nothing. The life swing's insane. This card's very obviously good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't actually die to normal removal.
Right.
So. Is there an exile spell that we can?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a few. There's your black 5 mana exile a creature or non-basic land or whatever, So there's a few things, but in the majority of your opponent's hands, they're not going to have an answer to this at all.
Yeah, and if it stays on the battlefield for a few turns, which you're probably already winning by a large margin.
They discard a card, and if they don't discard a spell, you're gonna get a bat or draw a
you'll
card.
Still have a few bat tokens lying around,
Yeah.
So. This is
just very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to tips and tricks, we want to have a little bit of a discussion about these hidden lands. These are caves. There's 1 for each color. They come in tapped. You can pay 4 and 1 of their color and tap and sacrifice them to discover 4 only as a sorcery. I would liken these to the draw lands from Phyrexia All Will Be One, but I think they're definitely a cut above those. Like we said, you'll get a cave in, I believe, either a third or 2/3 of the packs in the basic land slot. So these will be relatively plentiful. Patrick, where in the pack do you see these getting picked? That's sort of the first question I have about this.
It will take some time to settle in, I think. But let's say we're right about that this format will be a bit grindy and somewhat slower.
Sure.
This will go between 5 and 7 in the pack. So end of the first half of the pack.
Okay, I think I agree with you pretty much about where they'll go. I think, especially in some pods, there will be somebody who's like trying to do the cave deck. And I wouldn't fault you for that. If you get that Benthesaur early in the draft, right? The sort of the blue Phyrexian Gargantua sort of. Then you're like taking these a little earlier because you want to make sure you get as much value as possible off of that. There's a black creature that's kind of similar. It's got lifelink. It's a big lifelink creature that costs less for the caves you control. Stuff like that. Then you're going to maybe be trying to get these earlier. But also just, it's important to remember the deck that doesn't care about caves still loves these. Because like you're hellbent late in the game, you're looking for some action. This could very well find exactly what you need a good percentage of the time.
Yeah, and I think you would go, you easily play... Well, not easily, but you consider playing 3 of these if you have
for sure.
3 in your colors.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the question that we asked about the draw lands from Phyrexian would be one, and I'm not saying that this means I'll pick them early, but if I have 3 of them, I play all 3. Yeah. A good exercise is to think about in your sealed pool. If in the colors you decide to play, you have 6 of these caves, maybe you play all 6 of them.
Do you play them off color? Is the question here.
Oh, definitely not. I don't think. No, I don't think. I wouldn't go that crazy.
No, that only happens when you have other gate synergies going that are.
When you have a bunch of treasures, maybe. Yeah, if you have like a diamond pickaxe, maybe you play 1 of an off-color cave.
But the fact that we're
the fact that we're even thinking about it is says something about the power of these cards.
What if you get a 4/5 reach trampled dinosaur off your land at the end of the game?
Yeah, and all of the cards that care about caves also care about them in your graveyard. So if you crack one of these, it's as if you still control it for the purposes of those cards that care about them. That's important to remember.
No, this is... you immediately get the card. That is so...
Yeah. Yeah, what's not to love?
With these other draw lands that we had before, you often just drew another land, right? Or at least a ratio of chance that would just happen, and this will just get you something.
But the fail case here is like a 2-drop.
Yeah,
which sometimes is enough at that point.
And then again, if the format is somewhat slower and your curve is somewhat later, you will get bigger things on average.
So these are definitely going to be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see where they show up and how often people are picking them over actual spells.
Yeah.
For the other tips and tricks, this is also related to caves. We're going to kind of talk about the secret caves deck and whether we think it's going to come together. We talk about the sinuous Benthesaur, and then we've got the Gargantuan Leech, 7 and a black, costs 1 less for each cave you control in each cave in your graveyard. It's a 5/5 lifelink. And then Calamitous Cave In, which is not very good, but it's X damage to each creature and each planeswalker, where X is the number of caves you control and in your graveyard. I think this deck will come together a good amount of the time. I also think, similar to the Defender deck from Dominaria United, in paper, someone in your pod is going to be trying to force this every time. I'm not going to name names, but I think it's really there.
I think the Leech will be a better common than we expect right now, anyway.
Uncommon,
uncommon. Yeah. See, that's a problem with this set.
Yeah, this set symbol, it's impossible to tell. You have to look in the corner.
Change these set symbols because this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of any cave synergy at common, but there's some powerful uncommons for sure.
Is this an uncommon?
All of these are, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, it's really hard to see. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, you just need to look at the bottom of the card.
Yeah.
If you get 2 discount on this, even it's a common. It's
5 mana, 5/5.
It's an uncommon that stabilizes the game.
Yeah, I think this card's solid. I don't know where the caves deck will be and how many picks of actual spells you have to sacrifice to make the cave part of the deck function. But I'm optimistic. I always like seeing a secret deck like this have some potency. So yeah. With that, was there anything else you wanted to say? Any thoughts you have about the format before we close out here?
Yeah. Where's the green common I was missing? The Poison Dart Frog, I think it was called.
Oh, Lord. That's a mediocre mana dork. Okay.
I think that will have some impact.
I hope so, because the art's very cute.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
It's a 1/1 death toucher that they upped the game.
Well, no, it's a 1/1 that you can pay 2
Yeah.
to give death touch to. Do you want to be doing that?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, man. If I got the mana lying around, I'd rather just spend it to crack some map tokens or something. In a format that has proven to have some excellent mana sinks, you don't have to settle for giving your mana dork death touch.
That is probably the point, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the.
But I'm willing to be proven wrong. I love that card. It's
that was
very
one
cute.
of the comments I read. Like, hey, it's cute. It looks like they upped the level of a card like that.
Sure.
But maybe it's not the format.
Okay, I'd love to be proven wrong. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Ramp would pan out in a format with so many powerful 6-drops. So
I'm just hoping for a format that just playing big stupid dinosaurs is not one of the best things you can do. If the other things,
you may want to skip out on this one. All in all,
if blue white, for example, or white red, if they can compete. This will be a fun format. Yeah,
at the end of the day, this format looks like it has a lot of cool, weird things to try out. It does look like more of a fundamentals-driven format than Wilds of Eldraine in terms of like good habits rewarding you, cards with high floors and being more important than cards with high ceilings.
Yeah.
Just kind of these building a consistent deck that has a game plan but is not living and dying by its synergy is going to be more important in this format. And those are the formats that I tend to lean more in favor of. So I am optimistic about this one for sure. I think my pre-rating, just having done between 20 and 30 practice drafts so far, is probably like a 7.
Okay.
Which is what I came out of Wilds of Eldraine thinking it was. Probably a 6.5 or a 7.
I was lower on Wilds of Eldraine, as you know.
You hated it, yeah.
Yeah, I thought, especially the deck building was not very interesting.
Yeah.
The games were very good, though. So
the games are pretty solid, yeah.
Except so let's see if this is a bit better. Yeah, I mean, recently they've been very good. So.
Yeah. The past couple of years, Limited has only gotten better and better as the rest of Magic has been around. Yeah.
Well, see you on Friday.
See you on Friday. Thank you again for showing up and recording this with me. Just a reminder out there to everybody listening, I appreciate you listening to the end. I hope you have a wonderful time at your draft and or pre-release events. Let me know in the comments what you think we got wrong, what you think is the top-notch stuff in the format. What are your thoughts about this format so far? And again, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel's growth. And I hope you have a wonderful time playing this set. Patrick, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
All right.